A warm welcome to episode 38 of the Talking Shit podcast. I am Dr. Evil Genius.
And I am Captain Paul. How you doing there, Evil?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, man. Having a pretty decent week. It's nice that you're back from the boat so we can do these live shows. What's up?
Oh, man. Doing good, man. Just kind of back from constant back and forth between here and Massachusetts, up and down the river, and up and down the coast. So, look, I'm actually glad to be back, man. We have a lot of things planned on this, so this episode is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. We talk a lot off air about how we want to how we want to really get more people's voices heard, whether we agree with them or not, whether they agree with us or not. And I think that today's show is going to underscore the need for people to be heard, other than whatever the prevailing notion is on either side of the political aisle. So a quick backstory before we get into it. On Sunday morning, I got up and I woke up to a series of text messages from a really good friend of mine, Louis Rossman. And when I see that there's a bunch of texts from Louis, I'm like, yeah, this is definitely going to be interesting. And well, you know what? Why don't we just bring Louis on real quick? How are we doing, Louis?
Hello.
How you doing? It looks like you're at work, sir.
I am. I also have a cat.
Is that Blackberry?
That's Mr. Clinton.
Oh, that is Clinton. Okay. Clinton also has a lot of opinions, and some of them may get him canceled. So, Louis, I didn't really want to tell your story, but my story kind of gets started at pretty much the same time you were telling your story. But there were some things that you had to say on Sunday morning. Could you just kind of tell the audience a little bit about what that was?
One moment while I jog my memory.
Way to put him on the spot there, Evil.
Oh, I sent you a message on there was this one particular dating app that's supposed to figure out what it is. They say we have these really, really advanced algorithms that are going to try to figure out who you should be dating, who would be the best match for you. And one of the things that I said, kind of tongue in cheek, is the first thing that I got is somebody who said, I get along best with people who are working to dismantle the patriarchal, white supremacist, capitalist structures we live under. And I said 10 years of Google, Facebook, and every website mining my data, and this is the best app a dating match has for a conservative white business owner in New York City. I get it. This particular dating app has not technically mined all of my data, and I get it. They don't have deals with everybody else. I was just kind of speaking tongue in cheek and laughing at the fact that, I don't know, but in all seriousness, there is an element of, we've given up so much data to so many different companies that sell it to so many people, and at the end of the day, like, this is an app that's I think it's part of Match Group, so they're owned by they own a bunch of different companies like this, and I don't know. I just found it funny. That was the best that you could do with all the information that I provided you.
Yeah.
I was just laughing at it.
I think that's a match made in heaven, to be fair. You know what I mean? Opposites attract, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yin and yang. Yin and yang. And it's really funny, and I've had many discussions with Louis over the years on the subject. Yeah. I tend to vibe better with liberal women in totality than conservative women. So, conservative women have a little bit of an aggressive kind of tint to how they talk about things that's a little bit off-putting. And, I think that a lot of times liberal women, they sell themselves as having some sort of emotional intelligence and empathy and, inclusiveness and caring about people and all that stuff. Right. That tends to be what, how they kind of sell themselves. Right. And, I've run into a lot of problems where we will agree on 99.7% of things, and the 0.3%, oh, I can't talk to you, and they ghost you and they're gone. And, so after a while it becomes very, difficult to try to make matches, right? I've been so what was the you said Hinge was that dating app you were talking about, right?
Yeah. And I think that there also needs to be a separation between liberal women and women that are just seeking to dismantle a patriarchal white supremacist capitalist structure that we are there's a difference there. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I just don't think that I would vibe with somebody with that as their that's the first foot that you're putting forward. If that's the first foot you're putting forward, that's a bit more.
You probably have armpit hair. You probably don't shave. Yeah,
Not even that. It's just you're likely to be the type of person that sees like, oh, you run a business. You must be evil. I'm sure that you were simply born rich and you didn't actually have to do any work to create this.
Yeah.
You're just an asshole and blah,
Lewis,
blah, blah.
why aren't you giving up your business? Why aren't you giving your business up to the people of minorities? I don't understand this. So
I mean, I've had people say that the fact that I don't have a worker, that I don't make this a workers co-op makes it fundamentally exploitative.
I saw that on Reddit.
There was an entire thread on that. And again, I would expect, that's the thing. I don't mind dating a liberal woman. I mind dating that. Because there's a lot associated with that. There's a lot of loaded language in there that tells me that it's not just the thing. It's the use of that type of loaded language that tells me that I'm just probably not going to have the best of times with you. Versus any of the other.
Can we call it what it is, Lewis? Can we call it what it is?
Go for it.
Insufferable.
Again, I live in New York City. It's not like I'm new to dating liberal women versus conservative women. It's just like that is a breed. I'm most likely not going to get along with you. And I think the other thing that we wound up discussing in that particular morning was the difference in 2012 versus 2022 with a lot of these apps. I don't know if you've noticed when you say that you're a man that's heterosexual looking for a woman, there's a lot of men that show up.
Yeah. And so did you notice that while we were having that conversation, I made the mistake of checking my email?
You did. And can I say what it is that said in your email? Can I spoil it for the audience?
Well, let's take a look at the email that was sent to me.
Mumble was built with kindness, respect, and inclusivity in mind. We don't tolerate hate speech, hate symbols, or abuse of any kind in our platform. We have a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to misogyny, bigotry, and racism. We've received reports that you may be using language or images that don't adhere to our values. If it happens again, your account may be blocked. And I imagine this is because you said that you were interested in biological women in your profile. Is that correct?
No, I said as an addendum towards the bottom of my profile, that I am not interested in biological males.
Okay, so you didn't say what you were interested in. You said what you were not interested in.
Yeah. Right. So
and that's the thing. And what I think I responded to you with is that in 2012, you could report that for being in the wrong category. In 2022, that's transphobic or something, I guess.
Right. And because we fear them so much. Like we're so scared of them simply because we're just not attracted and we're not really into that. So basically they've threatened me with expulsion. If I because I'm not being inclusive. And one of the things I thought about today as we were preparing for today's show, isn't dating very exclusive? Like we look to exclude a bunch of people. A lot of people say I'm looking for my person. They're not looking to date the entire fucking city, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, am I wrong? Am I off here?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Like when you go into dating, right, you have preferences, right? And it's like if they're going to kind of flag your account for saying that you don't want to date biological males, which is fair enough if you're into women, you have to say that like women that say men, and this is an argument that you said and I agree with, if, I only date a man 6 feet or up, like isn't that along the same parameters? You're like, if you're being exclusive in that way? Like, if you want to make everything fucking inclusive, do we just get rid of all preferences on these dating websites?
Yeah, so it's really funny that you mentioned that. When I told Lewis about what happened, what was your response, Lewis?
I think it was something. Let's see. I think I was talking about how, like, I don't think this is a problem that's going to be solved socially or politically. I think it's going to be one that gets solved medically. Like, once you're at a point where the transition process is not, you undergo gender transition surgery and you take some hormones at the age of 30 or 40, but rather 500 years from now or something, you take a pill and it's literally as if your body had grown up as the gender you want it to be, like your bone structure, everything like that. Once that happens, I think that this will be a fringe issue. Like, because if you truly fundamentally have no way to tell, even with some sort of test or chromosome test or anything like that, what somebody's gender was at the time of their birth, I don't think most people are going to care at that point. Some will, but it's going to be a fringe issue. But I don't think this is a problem that you're going to solve politically. I don't think this is a problem that you're going to solve culturally or through sending people messages like this. I mean, there's it's like some categories are fundamentally not exclusive. I mean, in these apps, they say, like, are you a liberal? Are you a conservative? What are your hobbies? These are all things that are, there are reasons for these categories. And, and categories at some point are going to exclude people by nature of what a category actually is. And, what bothers me about this, I don't care if somebody walks into my store and I can tell that they're most likely identifying as a gender that's not the one they were born as. I don't laugh at them. I don't mind calling you by whatever pronoun you prefer to be called by. I'm not going to make a spectacle of you. I respect you as a human being. I think you should have the same rights as anybody else. I simply don't want to date you. And I don't understand how that in and of itself is considered hateful on a website that is pretty much, honestly, I can't tell the difference between Bumble and Six Flags. I'll just be honest with you. When I was a kid, I went to Six Flags and they said, you cannot go on this ride unless you are above 4'6". I was 4'5" and 3/4 of an inch, and I wasn't able to go on the ride I wanted. And I was sad the entire day. My dad tried to cheer me up. He got me fucking cotton candy. Nothing could cheer me up. I couldn't go on the ride that I wanted to go on. And then I figured, oh, I'm a grown up. I'm not going to run into this anymore. And then I installed Bumble. And it's, oh, by the way, I'm 5'9". You should know because I expect you to be taller than me. Oh, I'm 5'10". Oh, by the way, I'm 5'7". I prefer men that are not shorter than me. Fuck you. I mean,
how many of those women are getting reported and being threatened to be kicked off of the platform?
Be clear, the fuck you is not for the fact that you have that in your profile. I don't care. Put whatever you want in your profile. I'm not saying that it's probably the best way to find a man. If a guy puts in his profile, I need you to be C cup or higher, I'm not going to say that should be banned, but it's probably not the best way to find a quality woman. I'm not saying to get rid of that, but to allow that on a platform and then to not allow this is insane. Because I could argue that I think it could be argued, and I would be willing to stand behind this, that you have more control over the gender that you're identifying as or the gender you're choosing to put out there if you chose to have this type of surgery or anything on you than I do over my height. I cannot make myself 6 foot tall as a 5'6" man. But you can say that you want a man that's 6 foot tall, right? Is that not exclusionary?
Or isn't it the same people complaining about unrealistic beauty standards as far as body composition? I guess to them, it's easier to make yourself taller than to make yourself fit.
Yeah, I was actually having this argument with a woman last week, and they said, well, no, that's not the same thing because don't men like women that are like, let's say they want a woman that is not fat or something. And it's like, yeah, but you can lose. I guarantee if I put you on a treadmill for 1 month, you will lose weight faster than I will gain height if I hang off a bar like this with weights touching. I'm not saying it's not hard, but it is doable. And the thing is, I'm okay with that. Have your standards, by all means. Say what you want in your profile. Say you want to date somebody that is not a smoker or a smoker. Say you want to date somebody that drinks
but
alcohol.
That's not inclusive.
Have categories. And that's the entire point of dating is you choose who you want based on being in specific categories that you're interested in. And one of those categories that is very important to a lot of people is what gender were you born as? What is your biological? That is going to be very important to people. And this is the problem that I have with not the trans community, to be clear. I have no problem with the small subsection of loud activists within that community that pretend to speak for everybody that will try and destroy people's lives if you say anything contrary. Again, every trans person I have met in person has been kind, nice, and worthy of respect. And I've had no problem returning that in kind.
Usually they just want to live their fucking lives. They're not interested in trying to control your life or how you perceive the world.
Correct. Yeah, they don't want to become off as a political puppet.
It's this small segment of radical online activists that, like, for instance, I spoke up about a ban that a political streamer got recently, Destiny, on Twitch. I don't agree with him on a lot of issues.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot of stuff where there are a lot of issues where I actually learned something from it.
And what did you do in response to that banning?
Yeah, I deleted my Twitch.
He did it live, in front of everybody.
Look, he spent 4 or 5 years debating all different types of people, trying to get them to understand a lot of different trans issues. And he said one or two things in severe aggravation and frustration after certain activists wound up like just taking away $100,000 or $200,000 a year of income from him, which I think is a fair situation under which if you're streaming 8 to 10 hours a day to say something that's like really fucking aggravating in the moment, and the element people piled on and he's gone. But the thing is, like, there's. I forget where I was. There's a basic set of categories when it comes to dating, and that's a category. You're not going to convince the majority of people in America that there's something wrong with what you put in your profile. And the idea that I'm supposed to just, I'm just going to accept it and swipe left and just not say anything is asinine. You should be able to express what your preference is. And we need to figure out at what point is it going too far? Is it going too far when you say this is the gender that I want? Is it too far when you say I want a woman with this figure? Is it too far when you say I want a man that's this tall? Is it too far when you say I want a smoker or somebody who's not a smoker? Like, when is it too far?
Well, there is a portion of the people that believe that the problem is that men have standards at all. But I want to bring on somebody who we have a high regard for, whether we agree with his position or not. But it's important that his positions be heard. And I haven't gotten his opinion on this yet. So before we move on, we're going to welcome the esteemed Anirudh Garg. How you doing, buddy?
Hello, y'all. I'm doing great. How about y'all?
Wow, that was some Texas. Oh my God.
I'm a Texan.
Texas? Did you guys hear that? He's like, y'all.
First of all, y'all is very inclusionary.
It is, but it was that drawl, baby. It was that drawl. Like, you held on to that all and y'all.
I represent my community very well.
Yeah, you do. Yes, you do. So when we posed this subject to you, you were like, yeah, I definitely want in on this. So, I wanted to kind of give you the floor and kind of let you give your position on this email that I got.
Of course. So reading this email, it looks a little bit more nonsensical than what you were portraying it. I thought, okay, this is probably a TOS thing. For you, I'll give you my full position and then say with this incident in regard. Usually speaking, we are allowed to have preferences on who we want to spend time with. I think that's only natural. There are certain things we like. There's certain things that we don't like. Forcing a person to say, I want to date all types of women is the same as forcing a gay guy to date a girl. I think that's equally ludicrous. Mm-hmm. So it's one thing that we are. Are
you saying that it's akin to conversion therapy?
Almost. Once when they send you the camps, then I'll agree. It's 100% conversion therapy. But I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
Not soon. Hopefully long after I'm dead. But continue.
Yeah. So on that regard, I think there are two things. You can say that we'll probably judge you heavily if you say you have racial preferences for dating. But it's very different to say I have these preferences and I act on them implicitly versus I explicitly state them. Because if I say I only want to date white women, that's a very different thing than me just filtering through and only matching with white women.
But wouldn't that be like you respecting other people's time? Because I see on dating apps, especially where I live up here in the Northeast, where Black women make it very, very clear they only want to match with white men. There is also a subset of Black women that say they only want to be with Black men. What's the issue with that? And what's the difference?
So generally speaking, when you have preferences that are implicit, whereas you're just acting off of them, for the most part, until people really know that, they can't really be harmed by that. Whereas if I personally say that I only want to surround myself with Indian people because I'm Indian, or I only want to surround myself with these types of people, and then I say it in a way that's almost threatening other people in the room, such as saying, "Oh, I want a country with only my type of people," or "I
Right.
want a office with only men." You're effectively stating explicitly that there are certain types of people that are not welcome,
Right.
which you generally don't want to do that because from Bumble's perspective, they want as many people using their apps as possible, and they want you to be as miserable so you can spend as much money taking those apps. If people are not having a good time on their app, or they have no inclination to stay because they feel as though they're under threat, it's in Bumble's interest to be very, very sensitive to any hurt feelings that someone might have and ban someone's account, or in your case, at least give you a warning.
But
Right.
so
How do you think somebody is harmed by somebody making it clear that we're not a match? Because I see Jewish women here in New York City make it very clear they're only looking for Jewish men. Almost 100% of them make that very, very clear. How am I harmed by them stating who they want to be with?
So it depends. In their bio, do they say, "I only want to date Jewish men"?
Yes.
All right. So the difference between one and just filtering through and only dating someone who's Jewish, well, I don't know, he has a yarmulke or something that just tells everyone that he's Jewish, is that you're starting to place the expectation, or you're starting to implicitly say that these type of people are not affirmative. And for trans individuals, because of their unique position, struggling with gender dysphoria and societal expectations, that harm might not be measurably the same as a person who says, "I only want to date Jewish people."
So you believe that they should at least have, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you implying that we should at least leave the appearance that they might have a chance by not calling to attention what is ultimately going to filter them out of 99% of men?
Exactly.
Are you? Yeah, okay.
Because the situation is, for you, it doesn't really take a lot of effort to just leave that out of your bio. But for a trans individual who's dealing with dysphoria, who's dealing with having their family isolate them, dealing with all those issues, just not seeing that might make a world of a difference for them.
So why do their rights supersede mine?
So it's not a matter of rights per se. This is Bumble. They're trying to make sure that most people can access their platform, right? So they're making that same calculation where we're trying to make it as inclusionary for trans individuals, because unfortunately they might not be welcome in other arenas, which is why a lot of them tend to stay online.
Wouldn't it make more sense if they created a trans division so that people can click on that if that's what they want, and then every single person that you come across will be somebody that is going to consider you? Wouldn't that make more sense?
It might be, but then you're once again creating that same issue where you're making that filtering explicit. So if there's a pool of people who are okay with trans people, and that pool is significantly smaller than the broader population, you're once again recreating that alienation where not everyone is going to accept you. And that feeling,
but they're not going to anyway.
Well, I guess that's the one.
It's a matter of creating that appearance of acceptance. The appearance of acceptance is at least something, because we know this from studies that the two major factors that can lower suicidality among trans individuals is their societal expectation, acceptance, and their ability to conform to their gender through medical surgery. We can control one through public policy investment, public healthcare investments. I worked at an internship that tried to make it so that trans individuals could get cheaper access to healthcare. But on the broader level, we can try to create almost safe spaces. This is unironically safe spaces for trans individuals, such that they feel a bit more welcome to society and their journey in transitioning is better.
I just think it makes more sense to put them in a situation where every single person they see is open to date them, and because you can't miss what you don't have. So if I don't come up in their search because I didn't click, the trans button, and every single person they see is good with it, then how do they know that they're being harmed because I never show up in their searches, in their search results? You can't miss what you never had.
That's possible, but in a world where those pools are acceptable, like you have to say, I am, like Bumble, for example, splits into Bumble Business, Bumble BFF. They have a whole system. So if there's a separate one, maybe that's what you're saying, that these are the trans people that I have. These are where trans people are accepted. then you're all automatically creating that filtering. If it's a world where it's on the user end, where it's just a bubble, I don't want to see trans people, then yeah, maybe that might be no different. But it's hard to say. It all depends on implementation.
Yeah,
well, one thing that you had mentioned is that you want that one of the benefits of them having this type of policy is that it will mean that the maximal amount of people will be able to enjoy the app. You don't want to make the app exclusionary to certain people, and you want them to have the best experience in the platform. But if say that again.
Sorry, not the maximal number of people. I think it's the most utility, not just enjoyment.
Okay, because like if I use the app and I see that it's routinely trying to match me with people that were born as biological men, and then I uninstall it, I think that hurts in two ways. A, the majority of users are going to have this subsection of negative experience that ends in them choosing not to use it. But more importantly, it creates this nonsensical cultural war backlash where you have people arguing it to begin with. Whereas if you had a specific category that says, I am into men, women, non-binary, and I could just check the non-binary box if I wanted to see non-binary people, then there'd be no problem. But when you don't have that box and you force everything into that category, then you wind up with people that are aggravated with it, that are then arguing about something that they otherwise might have not argued about, and then just causing more friction with the trans community that may not even be necessary.
Well, couldn't you let's just put into an argument is that if you, let's say you get rid of the whole trans category and just label them as women, right? They meet up on a date and they find out they're trans. Couldn't you be putting them in more harm's way than someone that you find out that are like, oh shit, I'm not into that? Because the problem is I feel like, is that men in a lot of these dating websites, it's not okay for us to have preferences. It's not okay for us to have standards. Whereas with women and people of like in a minority group, it's perfectly fine for them to be highly specific of what they want in a partner. Where we're men, just regular everyday heterosexual men, it's kind of frowned upon. But like, I don't understand, like for me, like I wouldn't be interested in that at all. Like I would like a biological woman, right? Like I have now to raise a family with. And that's what a lot of men are looking for in their partners. It's so like a heterosexual male. And I don't know if you can agree with me or not, Evil, but it's like, we're looking to build something together. Right.
I mean,
that's what I'm interested in. I'm not necessarily interested in kind of having semantics and then like finding out someone's like, a trans person. And that's just inherently something I'm not into at all.
Yeah. I
feel like you're putting them in harm's way. And I just feel like if we're just gonna take away preferences altogether, then what's the point of dating websites? Like whether if I'm into a certain race, certain height, whatever, like if we're just like, what's the point? Like
I also think I just want to. I'm sorry for interrupting. The one area where I also think it's just putting them in harm's way in a different way, culturally speaking, is that it creates a point of friction between the trans community and me that otherwise would not have had to be there. It creates an aggravation for me. Every single time I go on this app and I see a man and I said that I'm looking for women, and like I am now going to have an aggravation towards that community, a small one that I otherwise do not need to have. And that's going to make a lot of people out there more frustrated and tend to be less accepting of issues that they otherwise may have been accepting of if they didn't experience these types of things.
Absolutely. And I feel like when you force your lifestyle on someone else, that's when the anger starts to happen, in my opinion.
Because like I use whatever pronoun somebody asks for. I have no problem with it. But like there are a lot of people out there that just see she, her, he, him, or they, them in profiles and just start making fun of the trans community or saying screw all that shit because they get frustrated by little things like this. And admittedly, when I read Twitter or Facebook or a lot of online political discourse right now, much of it is there's no nuance anymore. People are just aggravated and pissed off, and they've chosen their sides and hardened onto it. And I think like this is just one thing that's going to contribute towards aggravation that I think otherwise would not have to exist within that community, towards that community, that I don't want to see exist towards that community if there was simply a category drop-down menu to be able to avoid it.
All right. So you both make two very good points, and I think I'll address them. I'll start with you, Captain Paul. So it is true. Trans women are in danger. In some states, we have trans panic defenses. So if you kill a person who you slept with who was trans, you can get out by claiming that they were tricking you or that they were in fact, almost assaulting you, even though you engage in consensual sex. Right?
Is it consensual if something is under false pretenses? Because we talked about stealthing. There's a law in California that outlaws stealthing because you consented to protected sex, but when somebody slips the condom off, they change the parameters of the agreement unbeknownst to you and without your consent. So if somebody thinks that you are a biological female and you let them believe that, knowing that you are not, are you not engaging in sexual assault? or essay? Let's use the term essay.
I think those would be two different things because the consequences of stealthing, for example, could be the transmission of STDs, a possible pregnancy, a multitude of other factors that cause harm to an individual. Whereas I'm not necessarily sure how we would measure the harm that you would feel when you slept with someone and then later found out that they were trans.
So like
I don't know how to compare those.
I'll let you finish up, and I apologize for cutting you off here, but I'll just say this is just for someone like I do think that's a problem though. Which like not all obviously. I actually have my real good friends actually trans, but the people that don't disclose, it's like I think that is such a violation of trust. Like I think you got to be very open and honest with your partner, anyone you're going to have relations with in that way, and it's like you're opening yourself up if you hide it and then they find out. Of course there's going to be anger because as a man, like you're like, what the fuck? Like that's not what I thought what was going on. And so I get why
I agree with you on that.
I get why people want acceptance and love, and that's great. But people
can I add to that point
for a reason. Absolutely.
Can I add to that point, Paul?
Yeah.
When you withhold your status that is important to the other person, just as well as everybody else that it is a major issue. So you withholding that information on purpose, it is not just the fact that you are trans, it's the fact that you are trying to deceive me and trying to get something out of me that that you are not entitled to, that you would not get under normal circumstances with full disclosure. I think that's a level of selfishness that I'm just not willing to accept.
No, I agree with you. I believe it's wholly unethical to not make these types of disclosures, which is why most trans women do. In my experience, I've never seen a trans individual, I've met a few in my life, who would ever even think about not being completely upfront because it's a very dangerous thing for them to engage.
They're doing a much better job of it societal wide, so I got to give them that credit.
Yeah, so while I do agree with you that we should encourage openness and acceptance, there are, for many reasons, some trans women would choose not to because maybe their transition was very traumatic. They had family members alienate them, so they want to think of themselves as closer to women, and they're dealing with some mental trauma that prevents them from being open and honest. They probably shouldn't be dating. They should be focusing on seeking counseling. But for many people, sometimes they'll just make that mistake. The cost of that isn't to be murdered and then have their murderer get away with it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody agrees with that.
No. I'm not saying someone just like pops off with the 1911 in the back of someone's head because of that.
But but in many states that ends up being the case. So that's another type of violence that's there. And on to Mr. Rossman's point.
Because while I will not use anybody's pronouns that don't match what my IC, I'm not going to let anybody harm a trans person in my presence. I'm just not going to allow it. Now, if they pull out a gun, I'm out. Sorry, you on your own. But anything short of that,
hey, you tried your best.
I'm not with that because that person is struggling every single moment of every single day, and I think that many of them work very, very hard to avoid infringing on the lives of others. Lewis, what you got for us?
Somebody pulls out a gun, I'm pulling out my laser beam. Fucking fry them.
Destroy the guys.
Fry them. Not a fucking
and we
coward
bring in
like
split ends Jesus. How you doing, Lutch?
I've been better. I don't know what the fuck I ate, but it is not agreeing with me. So
it was probably inedible, but
I've been feeling a lot better.
So what is your take? Because you were real energetic in the chat. What do you got for us today?
So I mean, I basically echo what you guys have been saying. I think that we should be able to have our preferences. That it's safer to not to meet up. I think I agree with all of that stuff. So I want to, if I can, Anirudh, I want to circle back to before you were saying that the explicit versus implicit bias, and that it's the first thing you said was that it's probably not okay if you state I am only into these type of people, and then
that goes for both men and women.
Well, but then Evil brought up how that is not the case, and I'm just wondering what.
If you mean in terms of enforcement?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, that's an issue with Bumble. That's not something I defend. I find that indefensible on both ends.
Okay. Yeah. I would think. I mean, I agree in the opposite sense that it should be the same on either side. But I think that as Lewis was saying, for those who don't know, I'm short as shit too, and I can't grow. And I think
I just want everybody to know Lewis is not the shortest person on this panel.
We got short
That's
kings
For the
up in
first
here.
time ever, Lewis is not, I repeat, not
I'll hear
the
that
shortest person on this panel.
I'll hear
That's
that
not
about
possible.
one day. I'm fine.
Everybody stand up. I got to guess.
Well, you already know me. Lewis knows me. You know, he already knows where I'm at on that.
But Lewis, you brought up a great point about the fact that I don't remember what the first one was, but talking about how if you are somebody who wants to include trans or non-binary people in your choices, that should be a box that you check to begin with. I don't see the issue with that. And again, I think Anna Rudy, you were saying that was you were saying something about how it causes harm, but I don't see how that's the case.
No, if it's on the user end where they just check a box, I don't view that as the same as creating a separate category for trans-only individuals. I view the former as much more harmful than the latter.
Again, what is the harm if somebody doesn't waste your time?
I think the harm. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I mean,
yeah. So I don't want to cut anyone off, but effectively, you don't want to give the impression that trans individuals need a separate pool, one that's considerably smaller than the general pool. You want to try to avoid making individuals feel as though they're a further persecuted minority. That's not good for their health.
I think the entire idea here to steelman that is that if you by having another category, by saying that there is not men and women and there's men, women, and then there's trans people, that you're then essentially saying you are in your own separate category, you're not like us. The whole point, I mean, the whole idea here, and I could be completely talking out of my ass, is once you're done transitioning, that you are accepted as that gender, and that's that's what they're looking for. And to make that separate category means no, you're not accepted and you never will be. And that is what causes harm. So wouldn't it just be easier for all of us to just not have that separate category and then just swipe left so that they can feel like they had fully transitioned and they're fully integrated into society in that way, rather than adding a third thing that's like, non-binary, where I can then exclude you based on that?
I get all of that, but
is
it's
that
like we're doing a lot of we're jumping through a lot of hoops to try to pretend that reality isn't real. And
I mean, I just feel like everyone.
I'm confused by what you mean by that.
You said that they can't be in it. That we don't want to make them feel like they are in a different category.
Yes,
but they are in a different category. That is the reality of the situation, and so acknowledging that cannot be an offense.
So it's now a matter of issue of harm reduction, right? Trans people know that they are not the same as cis individuals. They know that. Constantly reminding them about that is going to internalize that of the harm.
It's not about constantly reminding. It's only when it becomes relevant. It is very much relevant when you are dating me what your what your biological sex is. That is when it's relevant. If we're just out talking, then you shouldn't have to wear a fucking badge that says I'm this, I'm that. I just even though everybody now is putting their own pronouns out there. But the point is, it's not relevant if you're on you're sitting on a train next to somebody and you're just shooting shit about the weather. It's not relevant there for you to say, hey, are you a man or are you a woman or what? It's just another person. So
in an ideal world, maybe, but we do treat individuals differently based on whether they're a man or woman, how attractive they are as a woman. And for trans individuals, they gain, admittedly, they feel more accepted when they're better able to pass.
But is it our job to make sure everybody feels accepted? I don't understand how it is everybody's responsibility to make sure that everybody, feels, because the thing is nobody is going to feel accepted by everybody. Like that is just a statistical impossibility.
I'll just say this:
why are we jumping through so many hoops on this?
Dude, what about net harm reduction in terms of if part of the harm reduction is in not making you feel like you're a part of a separate category? What would you rather have? Would you rather have a system where you're consistently matched with people that you have a much higher likelihood of matching with, or a system where you are pooled with the other 96 to 99% of the population that's going to swipe left constantly? I would personally much rather log onto this app and have a way of filtering out, like, the woman whose profile we talked about in the beginning, Dr. Evil. I would feel better if I logged into this. I know I'm not going to match with her, and she's never going to match with me. So wouldn't it be easier if I logged into this app and I were consistently presented with a group of matches that were actually tailored to me? And I kind of wonder, if there were a separate category, would you even really care as much about having that separate category if you were infinitesimally more likely to get actual matches, to be presented with people that
isn't that the fucking point of the app, is to actual match with people?
Exactly. Like people that you have your preferences, you're still
theoretically.
I could be totally talking out of my ass. I'm just thinking about how I would feel. But that's not how they would
I'm with you, Lewis.
I want to hear from Andrew.
Yeah, so I'm the author of a book on masculinity. My best chapter in it is my chapter on vanity, and I talk about
our conversation about it on the I Didn't Read Your Book podcast YouTube channel.
Yeah, check it out. But one of the issues with dating apps is not that they try to encourage individuals to have the best matches. They do the exact opposite. They try to inculcate addiction onto those apps so that people will spend more money. They profit off of men being miserable in those apps and spending more and more money.
Now we get to the crux of it. Right? If you just keep putting
showing me
males,
a bunch of people that I don't want to deal with, and then saying, by the way, you only get 100 swipes a day. Here's 99 women that you're probably not going to like, is the way they make money. Okay, so now this is starting to make sense.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. We're assuming
that ain't about harm reduction
at that point. No, so it both can be true. You can have harm reduction towards trans individuals, and then have harm increase against men.
Swiping for 6 months and getting no matches that are.
But you're a male. Who gives a fuck about you?
Oh, that's right.
Dating apps don't give a shit about men unless we're paying.
Even then, they still don't give a fuck, because I bought a lifetime subscription to Bumble, and it's still like, yo, we'll take your money, but, if you don't, at least put on the front that you're willing to date. How did you refer to them, Captain Paul?
What's that?
How did you refute this sub-demographic appeal? How did you?
I don't know. I don't recall.
Okay. I plead the fifth.
I will admit to being one of the simps that gave Tinder $14.99 in summer of 2016.
What?
I literally got to the point of like doing. I just to see if it even worked or if I'm ugly or something. I remember I was walking back and forth home because I was trying to lose weight, and I synchronized it to where every one of my swipes was a step. That's how I figured out it was 5,876 steps from my old store to my apartment. But I still wound up getting no matches, and then I just gave up. But they got my $14.99. So
Anirudh, I got a question for Anirudh. Seditionalist says, can I assume it is a bit like having to hear somebody is not interested if you're below 6 feet? Do you think that there should be harm reduction as far as that is concerned?
In a world where that would manifest similar harms as trans individuals have with suicidality and mental health problems, yes. The thing is, for a lot of trans individuals, when they come out, they lose a lot of social connections as their family kicks them out. They're more likely to be homeless. They're more likely to be victims of sexual assault. So any type of connection that they make, any social lifeline becomes infinitely more important. So for a person who is 6 feet or under, sure, you might struggle to find women to date, but you might still have a family that loves you. You might still have other social connections, friends or whatnot. That might be your lifeline. So that harm might not be the same.
Well, Lutch was 3'9" in the 8th grade, and his family was like, get the fuck out of here.
So, like, the one thing, Andrew, I actually have a question to ask you is, like, would you date a transgender woman?
I already have.
Oh, you already have?
Yeah. Well, okay. Date is a bit of a strong word. I've had a short fling.
Okay. So, no, because it's like, I was just kind of curious because, like, so you don't see any difference then, like, at all?
The experience was 100% exactly the same. The sexual experience was exactly the same as with the woman. Like there was no differences whatsoever.
Yeah.
We got along better than I have with previous women. I guess I'm not going to comment too much on my sex life. Don't want to, but it wasn't terrible.
Right.
I was fine.
Okay.
It was an experience.
Yeah.
What I'm asking is, I'm talking about the mechanical aspects of the physical relationship. Can you say it was 100% exactly the same?
It was unique. It was unique.
You're stalling on it, Anirudh.
It was different. It was different.
It wasn't terrible. It's better than any of the experiences I've had in the past 2 weeks. So I'll give him that 5 star.
Right. It was a positive experience.
Right. So what I'm saying is that, we've had conversations in our Twitter group, and you know, we've seen it time and time again where anytime, you know, as myself or Lutch go to challenge you on the, you know, you just say trans women are women. And it's like, but there's a reason why there is a name to describe them, trans women, because it's not exactly the same. And now we're kind of getting more of a fuller picture of exactly what your experience is. And that's pretty much, I think, what, if I don't want to really speak for Lutch, but that was what I was looking for a couple of days ago when we were talking about this. I know for a fact that the same has to be the same. And since it's not the same, it can't be the same. So when I was looking for you to kind of specify if there was a difference and there was, you wouldn't say so at all. That's why I pressed you on that.
I don't want to talk about my sex life on stream.
So what?
That's
So
not something I want.
We're just speaking generally then, because I mean, this is that conversation, so we can't really dance around it too much. But like, you know, what is 100% the same? Like, this girl isn't going to be the same as that girl. So I mean, I get what you're asking. That is the experience of sleeping with a girl the same as it is with a trans girl, and I don't know if that's a fair question. And like, you know, my obvious knee-jerk reaction to the question, would I date a trans woman, would be to say no. But I could see a scenario where you know, somebody who was very passable, like, I mean, fuck it, Blair White's hot, fucking, and I grew to know this person, and I could fall for that. I highly doubt that's going to happen, but I don't have any. There's nothing that I would intentionally do to stop that. Like,
I couldn't date someone bigger than me, man. You know.
Well, I can tell you from the way that I approach dating.
Real quick, at the same time. At the same time, I'm not going to seek that out. So if I know that you're a male, then that's already a block in my mind that I'm just not interested in this. So it would have to be a situation where I just didn't know and came to love this person enough and then found out. So that would have to be the reality of the situation. So I don't see it ever happening, but theoretically, there's nothing that, you know, that I would say, like, if I was in that position, I wouldn't be like, okay, well, I love you, but I'm not dating you because you're a man.
Well, I can tell you from my experience, the way that I approach it, if a woman has any fake body parts, all her photos are filtered, she's got surgery on her face, she's got fake nails, she's got fake hair, any of those things, she's automatically disqualified. Because if you're not authentic, I'd really want nothing to do with you, because you're already telling me you're a liar just straight up in the bio. 100%. So it is an instant left swipe for me. So since I'm very hard line when it comes to authenticity with the people that I choose to get involved with, then if you're not an authentic female, I'm simply not interested, for the same principle as I'm not interested in a woman with fake breasts. It's an automatic disqualifier.
So, Dr. Evil, on that, I want to ask you a question. If an individual suffered a burn and they got plastic surgery to replace damaged skin, and now they look a little different because of that, do you view that as an alteration?
I view that as something that I view it the same way as I view women with moles. I know I'm going to stare at it all the time and be disrespectful. So I'm not even going to put them through that. There are certain imperfections that I know that my eye is just going to go there, and they're going to feel my eyes constantly going to the imperfection. I'm not even going to do that to them.
The reason why I ask that question is because often there's a fine line. For a lot of trans individuals, they feel mutilated when they have organs that don't match what they feel.
They're not, though. There's a difference between somebody who was burned and somebody who was just born in the way that they feel is different. Those are not.
If the experience is the same in the brain, is there really a difference?
Yes.
There is. There is a difference. One, the person was mutilated, and one, the person feels that it is. I agree with you that the
phantom limb syndrome.
They may feel it's the same way. But this goes back to what Lewis was saying earlier, that you can't just transition yourself to be a taller person. I feel like, I'm on top of the world sometimes, but that's not the reality. And there's no for men or women, there's no avenue in which, whether it's height or weight, that you can pretend that you're not what it is. I mean, even the fat acceptance movement is about accepting the fact that you are fat. It's not pretending that you're not.
Yeah.
And just because you feel skinny, you're going to identify as a skinny person. That's not reality. And it's okay. And when it comes to, hey, again, the person sitting next to me on the train talking about the weather, if they're fat as fuck and in their mind they think they're skinny, that is irrelevant to my life and to the conversation that we're having. But when it comes to us dating and having a physical relationship, then what your physical body is or is not is relevant.
So I would agree with that line of argumentation if you would say that a person who has suffered from burns getting any type of treatment, grafting, whatever, that would be an alteration, therefore unattractive to you.
Well,
right?
For me, I understand the importance of that, but we're talking about somebody that has suffered tremendous damage. You know that surgeons refuse to perform surgery on people that believe that one or more of their limbs need to be amputated because they don't believe that those limbs actually belong to them. When they go to surgeons and they say, hey, I've got this leg, I don't feel like it belongs in my body, the surgeon looks at that as an ethical issue and does not, he refers them to a therapist.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because therapy is the solution there. For trans individuals, and we have documentation on this, their rate of suicidality goes down after getting gender-affirming healthcare. That's hormones,
it goes down like
surgery.
1%. It's like 42 before and 41 post. Like the numbers do not.
It's statistically insignificant.
Here, I have a study that saw a 76% reduction in attempted suicidal ideation.
Here's the crux of this issue. Is that now we're at a stage where reality has been split, where I'm sure you can find a study that will say this, that, or whatever, and we're not, and multiple and a meta-analysis, because there is people who are operating in the under the reality or under the assumption that their reality is what their lived experience when it's not. And so that's seeping into our institutions. And so I'm sure that there are, I mean, look at the fucking, what was that Army commercial where they were.
Oh, the two moms. Yeah, the two moms and all that. And then the recruiting went down by
the Army.
Yeah.
So, of course, there's people who hold your beliefs who are in the sciences.
All right. So if they are wrong.
Is somebody getting greenies back there, Lewis?
The cat's taking a shit, actually.
Oh, okay. Jimmy Dean thought he recognized greenies. We are very, I don't know, some people may be pro-trans, maybe anti-trans here, but everybody is pro Mr. Clinton.
That's right.
Oh, 100%. He looks adorable.
I think a lot of this argument when it comes to dating is just, I think preferences aren't, inherently a bad thing, right? And
they aren't. It's a matter of how you express them.
But I also think that being open and transparent in a relationship is the most important thing off the rip, right? Like obviously not oversharing in the middle in the beginning where you seem like you're fucking crazy, but being open and honest with the person, like, hey, I'm this, like, hey, like, you know what? Like, I'm a fucking Scottish fat fuck. Here I am, like that's.
And that's exactly kind of the direction I was going to ask. Like, what if there is somebody who this is that big a part of their life, where they've decided to transition and identify and all that other, or whether they transition or not, but they're coming out as trans or whatever it is. If that's not in your profile, then that's already deceptive. Because you're talking like if I was talking about myself and my interests, and I didn't bring up the fact that I was talking about football, and I just didn't talk about the fact that I like UFC because I thought people would have a lesser opinion and see that differently. That's inherently deceptive. Is it a big deal? No, but those are it's the preferences, and so it comes back to the question of why is it wrong, or how does it come down to the way you express it, as you responded to Captain Paul.
Yeah. So, for example, it's just a matter of the environment. So if I say that I only want to date white women, and then I say it in a room full of Black, Indian, Latina women.
But why would you say it in a room full of Indian and Latino women. It's not relevant there. That's like that's analogous to sitting on the train. You don't have to announce to them that you don't want to date them, but if they're coming up to date you, and there's only one white girl there, and you're only interested in the white girls, then
If I were the type of person that were only interested in white women and I expressed that preference, I likely would not go into a room that was filled with only black women and then express that preference. That would be stupid.
Exactly.
Bumble
you
is
go into
not
the
a room
app because
that
there are
only
white
has
women on the app.
Bumble is a room that
Yeah.
Bumble is a room that pretty much encompasses everybody in the world. And rather, in that case, there's a 0.1% or 1% of that room is saying, I'm going to barge my way into this particular category.
Absolutely.
And I think that I don't think that's completely analogous.
Well, I think
well,
it'd be me signing up on blackpeoplemeet.com expecting other Caucasians. Bro,
That would be like me on Christian Mingle.
Yeah,
Don't go to milfhunter.com and say you don't want a single mom,
No!
I don't know.
Yo! Go ahead, Andrew. Sorry.
Like in that situation, you would be going out of your way to specifically enter a room filled with category X and say, yo, I'm only interested category Y. Fuck category X.
Exactly.
That'd be like me going on wehateanarude.com and I'm just looking for Anarude.
That's not where we're at. That's not where we're at.
Hey, I wish I was that famous. I wish I was that famous.
So going back to the idea that there's a degree of deception to leave out something that is so
Pertinent.
Well, I would argue in many ways that deception is necessary for trans individuals, because there are stories where trans women would say, I'm trans, and the person would say, oh, I'm kind of into that, only enough to get their social information or any type of contact information, then proceed to harass them. Trans women I know have dealt with that. So there could be a reason for wanting to keep that
there are times I go outside and I fear that I may be attacked on the street, but it doesn't mean that everybody should be, everybody's, freedom to traverse the street should be affected, because in my one particular situation, I think I have a special need, like to trample over the rights of everybody else, because a very small subsection of the population, thinks that they got a very unique niche, almost never to happen, because the pool is so small to begin with, and then the people that are just like militantly wanting to fuck with their lives is an even smaller pool, and then we're going to basically have everybody else put up with deceptive people that they would rather not deal with in their life, which you probably are really dealing with a lot of deception in their life. And here's one area where they could do without that, but everybody's got to put up with that, because this person may or may not run into somebody who may or may not want to harass them. We've had guys be lured into being robbed off of these dating apps. They think they're meeting a woman, they go and meet her, but we're not changing the dating app rules because somebody could wake up with their pants and their shoes taken and their Gucci belt and their accounts emptied. We're not advocating for us to change everything in society because of the guys that have been beaten up, robbed, and or killed, thinking that they're meeting a woman. And then, the goons come into the hotel room or whatever it is, right? We know that that's a rarity, and we don't change all of society for it.
Okay, so two things on that. The first one, sometimes people are deceptive.
Oh my God.
Jimmy Dean, I was just growing to like you. Why would you do
that?
Okay, he broke my train of thought. Let me rethink. All right, so there are two things. One, deception we have to quantify deception whenever we're talking about, if figuring out how dangerous it is. The deception there is they will only disclose their trans after a couple of texts. That's a relatively minor deception. It could cause a lot of safety and waste some time for one person.
One moment, hold that thought. We want to let Lewis give off his parting shots because he's got work to do.
All right.
Oh, no. It was a pleasure talking about this. Thank you very much for having me on. I will see you all later.
All right. Thanks, Lewis, for gracing us with your presence.
I have to pretend I'm working, so I'll see you.
All right. Later, buddy.
And then there were four.
All right. So then those are deceptions. And second, to your question about rights, what rights are we trampling? I think we would all agree that Bumble is a private platform. They're allowed to do whatever they want in terms of their TOS. I think that's very different than a conversation about government rights or rights.
Yeah, this was a spiritual thing. Not it wasn't a clinical thing that I was saying. It was a thing of we all have an understanding of what the interpersonal dealings are in greater society, and we know that when certain people have problems, we don't upset the apple cart for even, like for black people are 12% of the population. We're not upsetting the apple cart for black people. And you can see it just like the way things are in society since, the 1400s. We're not, rushing to make better accommodations for 12% of the population. When you look at, men in general, which are just below half of the population, many things are not to the equitable benefit of men in modern society. So, and that's a much larger portion of the population. Why should we focus on the 0.3% and change all of society for the 0.3% when we're not doing that for the 12%? We're not doing that for the 48%.
So I think that they're not mutually exclusive. You can help the 0.2% while at the same time helping the 12% or the 50%. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, but the emphasis that we're placing on it in modern society is that the gap is very, very large. You would think that 6 out of 10 people were trans with how much emphasis we put on it in modern society.
Yeah, that might be the case of how we put preferences, but then our emphasis. But then that's not a conversation about whether or not the trade-offs that we're making to protect trans individuals are valid or not. Then that is, all right, if we're already doing it here, let's do it elsewhere. That's a separate conversation, I believe, than this one.
Okay. Lutch is frozen.
Oh, no.
I think it just kind of like, oh, wait, I saw movement.
No, go for it. Go for it, Paul.
All right. So like when it comes down to it, I think inherently for me, right, I don't think, and I'm glad I'm done with this website and this wacky shit, because I just think like we're getting into this bizarre world where, it's not okay to have preferences. For me, it's like, I see no problem with a woman or a man being like, I want this, I want that, I want a fit woman or I want a fit guy, right? Like if you're a fit woman, you're going to want a fit guy, vice versa. You want someone 6 feet or taller, whatever. Like it's perfectly fine for me if you want to date a white person, black person, Asian person, Indian, Native American, like whatever you want to date, because what we are attracted to, we can't necessarily control, right? So I just think for me, I see no issue that people have preferences. And I think you got to disclose if you are a trans person, because then you're going to have, like, it's unfortunate, but you are going to have people react violently. Am I excusing
or angrily at the very least?
Angrily at the very least. Am I excusing anyone getting murdered? Absolutely not. You got to have more rationale than that. But to be fair, if you're a guy and you put yourself in that situation and you're not into that type of thing, you're going to be extremely angry and feel tricked, especially, like obviously they would have had to transition to have the surgery because, maybe it's just something fundamentally you don't agree with. Maybe you're a Christian, maybe you're into Judaism, you know what I mean? Maybe you're Islamic. Like it's just, there's things that people follow and belief systems, and we can't just trample on everyone else's belief systems because of a minority subsection. And that's where I feel like we're getting into a little bit of a bizarre world. Let's just all be transparent, because why are we going to make it
I see what you did there.
So like, why are we going to make it like, why are we going to just hide it and just put it into the way and let's say that they're women? Just say, hey, like, this is what happened. This is what I am. They know what I'm about. I understand that trans women go through an identity crisis, and they do have a lot of suicidal ideation even before and after transitioning. And I can be respectful of that. And I want every human being to live happily. That being said, is we can't just like trample on everyone else's preferences, rights, thoughts, and opinions for a very minor subsection of the human race.
See, I think none of us on this panel disagree that we're all allowed to have our individual preferences. And I personally believe that we should always have highest preferences possible. That's my personal belief. But I think we all agree that the only disagreement we would have would be the way that we showcase our preferences.
Right. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm kind of, this is where I was going to go with it is I think it'd be far healthier for their mental health, right? is if they just knew like these people are into me. They want me. Instead of going on like whatever website you want to call, Match.com, Plenty of Fish, whatever it is, right? They know that group, that their matches or their possible matches would be into them. And I think that's far healthier than like reaching out to somebody that's like, oh, I'm not going to date you. I just don't I think that's far healthier for a human being's psyche. Like, I don't want to date some woman that hates white redheads because we're disgusting. Like, I want
I want to add to what Paul just said, because that's really important. When I see a woman who is a 9 or a 10, I instantly swipe left. Do you know why? Because I don't even want to offend her with my attention. I know that she's going to look and she's going to be like, look at this guy. He's a 7. I only belongs with 11s and 12s. Who the fuck does he think he is?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, why would I swipe on somebody I know would never swipe on me? I'm not even going to waste their time nor mine. Just not going to do it.
You are 100% wrong, and you are really bad with numbers. You are at least an 8.5. I think a 9.
You're gonna have to explain that with the numbers later, but that's a different. But what we want to know the numbers on is intervenable factors associated with suicide risk in transgender persons. A respondent-driven sampling study in Ontario, Canada. Can you please explain what they found? Because this is like really long, and I'm not going to scroll through all of this. But yeah.
A lot of really complicated numbers.
Yeah, Jimmy Dean. I purposely do not put anything that lets anything about my economic status show in my bios on purpose. So we're there, Jimmy. We're there.
Yeah, go ahead, so he doesn't get roofied. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, well, my car gets roofied all the time, baby. Top down.
Yeah, so this article is just talking about the rates of suicidality. The second article that I sent you, the one from Australia, is looking at the factors associated with suicidality. If you want to pull up the second one, I think that's far more relevant to this conversation.
Before you jump off this, I would love to know if we could scroll down to see the sample size. Because
of course, I think this article had about 433 sample size.
Just do Control F and
N equals 433.
So exactly. So how many? So that means there are, without reading the study, let's just say that it's studying people who deleted themselves. That's a number. So what is the number of pick any other demographic? What's the number of let's say white women that
what was the control for this
in the same time period?
Do we recognize 433 as a large sample size? Does that qualify as a large sample size for you?
433, especially for trans individuals, is a very adequate sample size.
Well, for trans individuals, yes, but
because their population is significantly smaller.
We're talking about relative to other studies and other samples. No, you're usually
we normally wouldn't accept 433 as a comprehensive study.
The sample size is dependent on the population you're surveying. So the sample size requirements change based on the population size that you're surveying.
But my point is the efficacy of the study is dependent on the size of the sample, or at least somewhat dependent on the size of the sample. So what I'm getting to is that yes, while there is a high rate of suicides in this group, there is a higher number of deletions in other demographics, and you're not advocating for those demographics.
I've written a book on masculinity because of how appalled I was by the suicidality among men. I definitely am advocating for that.
So then, so then bring it to the specific situation where we were talking, and the person meets, and I'll put myself in there. I've been swiping for 6 months, and I've gotten 0 matches. I finally get a match. I'm talking to somebody, and we're getting along, and we agree to meet up. And then I go and meet up, and I see that they're trans, and I'm not attracted to them, and I get the. Yeah, I go home and I off myself because I can't get a date. That situation occurs more often than
that. People commit suicide because they're not able to find dates who are non-trans.
No, just not being able to find dates at all.
relationship. That's why you have
that's very low on Maslow's hierarchy
regardless of the reason, the numbers are higher in other demographics. And so if this is something relevant to that, then what is more likely or who is more likely to off themselves in this situation? Simply by the numbers.
Just by the numbers, right? I get what you're saying.
Wait. So
you'd have to look at the ratio, Lutch.
Yeah,
we need to look. So of those 433 people, what is the ratio of people who have had suicidal ideations versus not? And then you'd have to compare that to the general population, especially among heterosexual men. I don't have the numbers. Anirudh probably does. But I would probably say that that group of people is the only group of people that has a higher chance of thinking about self-termination than men, even though men greatly outpace women when it comes to that. I get, like, again, this is from out of ignorance, but my just lived experience tells me that a trans person is going to be more likely to think about self-termination than a heterosexual male, regardless of the situation.
So there's actually a situation where both you and Lutch are right. Men have a greater suicidal ideation than women. Trans women have slightly more than cis men, but trans men have the highest rate. Trans men have the highest rate of suicidal ideation among trans individuals.
Nobody really thinks about them because very few people click the box for the tougher road to hoe.
Yeah.
Right.
For a lot of trans men, transitioning is horrifying. Well, there are some trans women who will get support. There are very few people who will support trans men on their transition.
Let me ask you this question, because this has always been something that I've kind of noticed, but anecdotally. Of the people who go the trans men route, what do you think is the percentage, a ballpark figure of those that have experienced SA in their lifetime?
That's very hard to say. Transgender individuals are at a higher propensity of facing sexual violence than the general population for a multitude of reasons, especially when they're younger. They're more likely to be homeless and more likely to be vulnerable. They're easier targets because of the social stigma against them. For a multitude of reasons, they're a target, unfortunately, for predators. And predators, they don't really care who their victim is so long as they have a victim.
Right. So from what I hear, especially coming out of Brazil, because I heard this, I forget exactly where I heard this, but because there is such a there's a culture that there's a culture of men taking liberties with women of all ages, particularly in Brazil, that some women try to put on a hyper masculine appearance so that they can evade SA. So that's why I'm asking you, like, when you look at, the trans men side of things, just a ballpark figure. What do you think of the chances of that they have dealt with SA before deciding that they're going that route?
See, that's a very, very complicated question, and there's actually some evidence for this. So, for example, in a lot of sub-Saharan African countries, there's a practice called breast pressing, where mothers will iron the breasts of their children so that they appear less feminine. So they can go to education, avoid being sexually assaulted. We have documentation about this. I am by no means confident enough on that information to know how one.
That's why I just asked you. That's why I asked you for your uneducated guess. That's all I was asking for.
I'm uncomfortable making an uneducated guess on this, but I would assume that there might be a part of the population who is affected by that. I do think it's possible that your inclination to transition might be driven by early childhood trauma. Similar to how being gay is sometimes influenced by early childhood trauma. So I believe so, but I am by no means confident on making any type of strong assertions here.
Lutch, you give us your uneducated guess.
I mean, it makes sense that that would have a causal relationship. Jimmy Dean in the comments.
He's killing me.
It makes sense that they're having quote unquote issues. I'm not saying that being trans or whatever it is, just issues in being deviation from the norm when you experience those types of things, especially in your developmental stages. So I think that without having to do a large study, I think it's fair to say that it is probably the case that trans individuals are more likely to have been SA'd in the past than your average person. I don't think that's a controversial statement, and I could be wrong, but it makes sense that
Yeah,
would
it makes sense to me too. What do you got, Captain?
I mean, I just think as a whole, I would actually have to agree. I think trans people in general will have a higher suicide rate because I think anything with kind of like mental illness or anything affecting the brain, especially when you're taking hormones, it's just there's so much going on there, and people react to treatments in different ways.
Mhm.
Like some people, they feel really good after it. Some people actually, you know, kind of, I would say, hate it, and they actually detransition, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like
Yeah,
you have these like this subgroup that goes through so much mental anguish, because I feel like it is a mental illness, gender dysphoria, that they're going to have a higher rate of suicide due to that. Like if you're going to just say on the pure numbers, it's actually 69% of suicides are by white middle-aged men, right? But if you're going to say a certain subsection of people like trans, they have a higher maybe percentage base, probably. Yeah, I would have to say so, because they go through a lot more mental anguish than any other group, because there's just so much going on there with hormone treatments and self-identity, acceptance, and even, like I said, detransitioning if they hate, like, oh my God, I don't like this. And there's just so much that goes into it that I can't even wrap my head around. So, and oh yeah, I bet you did.
What I think is maybe an unfair characterization of the position that we hold, I think includes that not you specifically, Andrew, but people who are of your who hold your position on this issue, believe that I don't mean to speak for anybody, so telling to disagree, but we tend to see this as an issue because it's directly related, and then because we have an opinion on it one way or the other, the assumption is that we don't care about trans people, or that we hate trans people, or that we're transphobic. That's and that, of course, is not, we all had to qualify that, like, oh, of course, if you're this, I'll do that, and I'll do that, because the assumption is, if you hold this position, that you are going to hate these people. And that, I don't think, is a fair position for people to be coming to.
It's really funny. I want to just kind of put this out there. When me and Louis Rossman was talking about this before, he shares my disdain for adding obia and obic to terminologies where it's just simply a misnomer.
Yep.
And what it does is it removes the actual meaning and the gravity of the word. It dilutes it. And it does that. It doesn't seek to dilute the term, but what it does is it seeks to add shaming to just somebody's, just overall viewpoint. So when you look at
these phobias, the homophobia, transphobia, all these things were never
whorephobia.
They were never meant to be descriptive, because they're not correct. They're meant to be words of attack. And so this is where, like the I don't know if it would be with homophobia specifically, but this is the type of language manipulation and obfuscation that I talk about all the time, coming from the left. That it's, the new thing now is the "Don't Say Gay" bill, where as the bill has
no language in the bill that
has nothing to do with that. It could be just as easily called the "Don't Say Straight" bill. It's don't have secret sexual conversations with 3 to 7-year-olds, and like to name it that is to purposely
mislead. It's purposely to mislead a population,
to make people who don't know any better. Oh, why would you be against the "Don't Say Gay" bill? Like, why or why would you be for the "Don't Say Gay" bill? And it's just it's getting deeper and deeper and deeper. That tactic, I would say, that tactics of obfuscating language, so that you can, no matter what your position actually is, you're taking the moral high ground, just a priori.
I'll say this, because I just want to piggyback off of what Evil said, because actually I just made a video today that'll be released in a couple of days. I think that when you take, like, for example, a word like transphobia, right? When you take words like that and you take it completely out of context, everyone that just slightly disagrees with like how you do things or maybe how your lifestyle, right? Or how you portray yourself and do things in life. And if every single thing you do that is seen, I guess, in a negative light to that minority is transphobia, the word loses all power. It's like, right, it's like when you call people Nazis now, right? Before that used to be a really bad like description of someone. Now
you had to actually be part of the Nazi party.
Like now, bro, yeah. I can post something on Twitter like, man, the Bruins beat the Rangers 5-2, and some asshole will comment, you're a Nazi. Like,
yeah, I did. That was me.
Yeah, I know. You bigot. Yeah, that's why you don't suck it. But anyways, I just say this is like, for me personally, it's like when you take the power from the words, they lose all meaning, right? So like when you call someone a racist now, it doesn't have the damning effect it used to, or it does, like when you call someone a Nazi, it doesn't have the damning effect what it used to, and that's the problem I have. Like both sides do it, but it's been more the left that's been more outspoken about it. It's like with those subsection, those groups, it's like, dude, you're taking the power away from that word. Like it's just because someone doesn't want to do a certain thing, certain actions with you, whether it be in a sexual manner, relation manner, doesn't mean they're transphobic.
Right.
So different preferences.
So let's look at the definition, because I think that Adam Root and I are probably going to find some common ground here. The term transphobia has been defined as emotional disgust toward individuals who do not conform to society's gender expectations. The operative word here is disgust. I don't think that most people understand just how powerful that word is and the connotation of the word disgust. So basically what we have going on now is that if somebody just points out a verifiable fact, they are now labeled with this. Now, do these people have that disgust? The vast majority do not. So by this definition here, the vast majority of people who have been slapped with that term, it does not apply to them. Okay. What do you got to say, Andrew?
So I think that disgust is, we might end up arguing about what that word means. I think disgust would just generally mean ill will.
So I think that's a good place to start. What does that mean to you? What does the word disgust mean to you?
I would say that you do not want them in your presence.
A lot of people are not even saying that. Most people are just saying, I'm recognizing what I see. And I don't really have an emotional view on that, but I am now becoming angry because I feel like I'm being gaslighted because somebody is telling me that what I can see verifiably in front of me is not what it is, and I can see it.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're getting angry at that. They're not being angry at that person who is existing. They're like, oh, do whatever the fuck you want to do. But I think that, sports should be fair. Now we know Anaru doesn't think sports should be fair. So we got to, I have to give him that leeway, right? The rest of us in modern society do believe that sports is supposed to be fair because that is the appeal, is equal competition across the board. So I know that you want to see Mighty Mouse facing John Jones. I know that that's what you want to see, but we're never going to see that. So
I don't think you understand my position.
I'm just giving you shit.
So okay. All right. So
but yeah, most people don't really care if they're in the presence. They don't care if they exist. I think that people are looking at it like, you're telling me this person is exactly the same as this other person when it's verifiably untrue. And by you trying to put this ideology on me, now I'm angry and upset. And it still doesn't have to do anything with what the actual subject is. Now they're not pissed off with the trans community. They're pissed off with you.
All right. So actually, I want to use the trans women in sports as the example because I think that's a perfect way to illustrate maybe where our disagreements is and maybe a place where I can change you. So generally speaking, whenever that's a competition, let's take women's sports, for example. I want the best woman who plays within the rules to win. Right. I think you would all agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep. So I believe it's inherently transphobic to make that distinction if it's a trans woman who wins or a cis woman who wins.
Why?
But nobody.
Why?
Because they both are women. But where's the disgust?
Right.
Why is it I'm pretty sure there were a lot of people who showcased Disgust. I mean, Lutch made a couple of tweets too when Ilya Thomas ended up winning first place. He said it was the death of women's sports.
It is.
Disgust. That's a.
That is just recognizing blatant reality right in front of your face.
So I would.
There is no emotional disgust towards Leah Thomas. I hope that she has all the best things that you can have without taking from other people, which is what she's doing, and that may give me emotional disgust. But not her existence.
The ramifications of it cause disgust, not the person existing.
Exactly. So her inclusion into women's sports is what caused disgust. Is that fair to say?
Yes. But her being whatever she claims to be, no one gives a flying shit.
Right.
No one cares.
All right. So
the fact that she is trans and also competing with biological females. It's not the fact that she's trans and she's in my face, and so now I'm mad that I'm so disgusted by this person, which is, a position that, again, not you personally, but a lot of people on your side of the issue characterize everybody on our side of the issue, that we are disgusted that this person could exist. And I
think we should be allowed to decide how we feel on it.
I am neutral at this. I don't give a fuck about Leah Thomas as a person.
Right.
I give a fuck about the concept of fairness in sports.
But Anirudh, just keep going though, because I'm actually I want to flush out.
Yeah, this is going to be a long line of argumentation. So generally speaking, if we affirm trans identities and say that they are women, we have to treat them like women. That includes their inclusion in women's sports. Now, caveat: trans women have a significant athletic advantage over cis women in many, many sports. I would say almost all of them, except maybe some where it's benefit to being smaller.
Chess,
gymnastics,
auto racing.
I don't know about chess. I don't know about auto racing. I haven't looked at data for that. So maybe not. I don't know. But here's the fundamental difference. It makes no difference to me whether a trans woman wins a sport or a cis woman wins a sport. Mm-hmm. And I think saying they're not allowed to compete because they have an advantage is asinine, because for the most part in sports, we want the person with all the advantages who plays the best to win.
Well, why are we pressing for trans men to be in men's sports? Why are we pressing really hard for that?
I'm pressing. There are trans men in men's sports.
Yeah, but see that, and this is the inherent issue. I get where you're coming from in some aspect, right? So there is some genetic freaks out there, right, that are just born above and beyond other people. But when you go through male puberty and you have higher bone density, stronger muscles, and you have like about a year of transition, right? And even the NCAA, it doesn't even need a complete full year of like hormone treatments to compete. There's such a significant advantage Thomas has compared to those other swimmers. And like, I guess the problem where it lies this for me is that you're robbing these girls that have done this sport since they were young, right? Like a lot of those top elite swimmers, and just in actually any athlete, but I'll just use swimming for this example, have been swimming since they were probably 6, 7, or 8 years old. They went through high school, they got a D1 scholarship, and let's just call it how it is. Many of them won't make the Olympic team. Like, this is going to be the height. This is going to be the moment in their lives that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. They might not win it, but they'll be in the top 10 in the nation, and that's an amazing feat. It gets robbed from somebody that was like 500, 456 or something like that. And on the men's side, it gets robbed from somebody that goes from being kind of like a mediocre collegiate swimmer to now in the top 1 percentile in the women's
actually
sport.
number one, complete number one.
So I'm going to argue against the use of the word rob, because in the same scenario, some random immigrant comes, she's a genetically freak, went through puberty as a woman, she's a cis woman, she comes and beats everyone. Is it still a robbery?
No,
because she's a woman.
But like, but see, that's where I'm kind of lying it in, is like, I'm cool with them competing in some section, right? Like competing in something, but I'm not cool with them robbing women, right? And this is the thing. I'm not cool with them robbing women of opportunities, because like that's where I think this lies in problem, is you take a scholarship away from a girl that's been working her whole way for it. I understand sports isn't inherently fair. Trust me. I tore my ACL, MCL after having a D1 scholarship for hockey. I, more than anyone, understand that life can't be fair at times. But at the same token, the competitive advantage, it is kind of, you'd be lying to yourself if you're saying the competitive advantage is somewhat similar. There's just such a
Wait.
dynamic. Like when I'll just say this, and I'll let you speak after this.
Mhm.
And I'll let you flesh it out. We had a girl in high school hockey. We played D1, play on the men's side, and she did okay. But it was kind of an unwritten rule. You don't go against her. You don't hit her hard. You don't like go like full bore.
The rules are not the same for her.
Because you will kill her. And there's actually been girls, unfortunately, that when you face men, collision, the same thing. Like just the bone density, the muscle, like they've been paralyzed. And I don't want to live in this fantasy world, right? Where we're not acknowledging the anatomy, just acknowledging the differences between men and women. I'm fine with her living her life how she wants to live it. I have no problem with that. I have a transgender friend. That's fine with me. But let's, we need.
Wow,
to
you
have
sound like the typical white man right now.
Yeah, I do. Sound
I know, I caught that too.
I have black friends doing me, but
You have two Indian friends too.
but
I have a really pointed question to Anna real quick though.
All right.
So, do you believe that women, when we say women's sports, that it was meant to separate by gender, or it was meant to separate by sex? Even though woman is a gendered word.
What was the spirit of the word? Yeah.
Historically, gender and sex have been the same thing. We are redefining it and separating them out of a utility that it creates right now.
So which one do you think is the original reason for making separate?
I think the original, it's either because they both were the same, it was both sex and gender. Now I think it's more important that we separate sports by gender, not sex.
That's not what I'm asking you. I'm saying when they originally...
And that's crazy arbitrary too.
Wait, let's... If A equals B and B is equal to C, A equals C.
You didn't hear the question. So when they originally decided to make women's leagues for the first time, did they do that because they wanted to make it for what we would now call the gender of women, or what we would now call the sex of female?
Historically, probably for sex.
Right. So that is why that even if you change your gender, you don't get to be in the league for the other sex.
Yeah, but we're not dealing with 1920.
Even though it's women's sports and that is a gendered word, it is female sports.
Right. So I don't see it the same way.
Right.
I don't think of it as female sports. I think of it women's sports.
But the point is that hasn't changed since then. The idea is to separate the sports on the basis of biological sex.
Wait, it has
That was
definitely
always
changed.
The point. Gender and gendered words were just as synonymous when they did that. So now
One second, Captain Paul. Do you understand why this debate right here? I want you to understand this, Captain Paul. Is not that, we want more taxes and we want big daddy government. Is that every single time that we create a policy and there is a spirit behind creating the policy, people want to find loopholes in the policy. And now we have to write more specific language into laws. And then we end up with more laws.
You just want daddy government to fuck you. I don't care. I don't believe
I just want you to understand, because Lutz was very, very clear. Since the beginning of sport, we understood that woman equals female, right? And then when we're like, we know that they meant female. No. We're going to stick. I prefer that we stick with the women so that it jives with my agenda. When you know that wasn't the spirit to begin with, and you know that wasn't the spirit, but you want to kind of switch it because it fits the agenda. And that is what is frustrating for a lot of people.
And Andrew, real quick, let me just piggyback on that.
I feel like I have not had a chance to respond.
Guys, let's give Andy Rude
all right.
Let's give him a full chance to talk.
Once again, anytime we're making a decision, I don't do it based off tradition. It wasn't, the spirit might have been for sex. That's irrelevant to me. For now, I only care about I care about utility.
What?
I care
utility?
about what creates the greatest value now.
Okay.
So that's from what perspective? Because from women's athletes, that's not what you're doing. Okay. And there's more women athletes than there are.
The greatest utility to who?
So if you're so if you're talking about utility, then there are more women who are being harmed by not having a fair playing field than the very, very few trans women who want to be athletes.
Okay, first of all,
so that's not utilitarian. It's doing more damage for a specific reason.
No, not at all. It's not even close. sports are a social event, and actually, let's highlight the Utah governor, who I love right now, is a Republican. He vetoed a bill that would ban transgender athletes from competing in the sport that they identify with, the gender that they identify in. He did so for a very poignant reason, because especially in high school sports, the reason why we have sports is that it's a community engagement. The utility of sports is not what individual athlete gets. The utility of sports is the communal engagement that it brings. We talked about this when we did the live stream. If Captain Paul, you didn't watch it, we talked about how whether or not a country sees their champion win or a city sees their state win, that creates a lot of goodwill and utility for them, right? So the utility of sports is not, oh, this person won or this person lost. The utility of sports is always going to be the social value that it creates, whether that be monetarily, investment,
okay.
whether that
Can I point out something that disrupts your argument, Anirudh? I'm just going to point this out real quick, Lech, and I'm going to pass it to you. Everybody arguing for trans participation in cisgender sports, the vast majority of those people pushing for that don't actually watch the sports. They don't give a fucking shit. The most people that have the problem with this issue are the people that have children that are playing the sports and actually care about the sports and support it with their money, with their attention, with their presence. The vast majority of people who actually care about the sports do not support that. I'll give you a different example. A lot of the people that believe that the top WNBA player should make as much as the top NBA player, none of them watch the WNBA. Not a single one of them.
Absolutely not.
I agree.
Well, actually, and like, can
I pass it to Lech real quick? Because Lech had a thought. I just wanted to.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't really remember where I was going with that, but Paul, go ahead.
All right, so like essentially, like Anirudh, I kind of get, I understand what you're saying. It is about community, it is right. The thing is, though, there's a difference. To me, when you're in high school, and this is just me coming as an athlete, right? You want to play in a situation where it's fair and you're competitive. And if you want to have all this like utilitarian, like, you know, how would I say, community? There's house leagues for that. I
was going to say intramural sports,
there's
right there.
There's things out there. If you want to not have any subsections, there are sports like that out there, right?
But there's money, but like and there's scholarships on the line.
When you're having a competitive sport that can actually help someone like live a dream to go to college and get educated, and that's actually a greater discussion we can have at a different panel. How the education's fucked and it's too expensive. But like some of the way these athletes get to college, the only way they can afford it is scholarships.
All right. So on that, I want to ask you this one question. Do you believe that a cis woman is more deserving of a women's scholarship than a trans woman?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because they are a biological female that are competing in their sport, and they went through puberty as a woman. You know what I mean? Like if someone comes into the sport, like let's say they're competing, let's just keep it swimming, I guess. Like they're men's swimmer throughout high school, and then freshman year in college they can get a scholarship if they transition. I don't necessarily agree with that.
Andrew, let me flip the question onto you then. Would you have an issue with a man getting a scholarship that was meant for a woman?
A man getting a scholarship that was meant for a woman? Does he identify as a man?
Yes.
Then I have an issue.
So
if he identifies as a she, if she's a woman, then I don't care.
You know, there was a power builder, a YouTuber,
yeah, I know
a few years ago, who went to a women's powerlifting event, and he just told them, "I identify as a woman today." And then he went, he competed, smashed all the records, and left. His records actually still stand to this day.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
All right. Well, you're keeping that same energy, so I got no problem.
The reason why I have this is because, well, this is why I would say that your position is transphobic, because you're not treating trans women as equal to cis women in the rights that they get.
But that is not the definition of transphobic. I'm not going to allow you to do this, Andrew. Right. At this point, I'm not going to let you do that.
Can I use the word bigoted? Would you agree with that?
No.
Because I don't hate.
Because I don't have an issue with them.
Well,
I have a problem with the utility.
You have a problem. Wait.
I don't have a problem with them, the people. I have a problem with the utility, the ramifications of.
What are the ramifications of giving a trans woman equal rights to compete? And
because the level of competition is not equal. It's not equal.
Okay.
There is a hormonal that they actually have standards for both men's sports and women's sports. They have a standard of the top amount of testosterone that could be pumping around in your body. And you know what happens? We get the Vitor Belfort. We get the Vitor Belforts out of here for a reason, because we have a standard of what we expect is the normal upper limit of testosterone in the body, and we don't let men go above a certain amount because we know it's not fair. We know this. We know this, right?
So that's perfect. So
when you allow a male who can only go as low as 600% of what the upper limit of a woman is allowed, it is fundamentally unfair.
All right. So then if you create a regulation that says, all right, women have to, if you're competing in the sport as a woman, you identify as a woman, you have to have this level of testosterone or below, otherwise you can't compete. I'm fine with that because that's.
But that's the way it always was. The activists forced these people to, quake in their boots and change that. That was the rule.
What sport had a rule that you had to have a certain level of testosterone, a minimum level?
Almost
of testosterone
all of them do. Almost all of the Olympic sports, almost every single one of the sports has an upper limit that you're allowed to have.
Upper limit.
If you have too much, testosterone as a cis.
I mean, that's actually funny enough. That's actually,
and it's the same thing for cis men. If you go above the upper limit, they flag you. USADA flags you. WADA flags you. Actually, and they get you up out of there.
It's actually funny if you go below the limit as a male too, because to dump steroids, you put estrogen in your body.
Oh
that's the thing is that's how they caught Manny Ramirez, bro. He was on estrogen. You know what I mean? So
right. So again, I'll meet you guys in the middle. If a sport wants to say we want to create minimum testosterone levels, and we want to ensure that I want trans men and trans women to be treated just the same as men and women. So if there's a rule that says you need to have this threshold of testosterone or this interval, and if you don't meet that, you can't compete in this gendered sport, I'm perfectly fine with that as long as it's applied equally. In a world where that law does not exist, then I view it prejudicial to deny trans women a role to compete if they are identifying as women and competing in the same category with the same rights as trans women.
Okay, so my one argument to this though is did they go through male puberty? Because that is significant. Right, unless you go onto puberty blockers, where you never went through a male.
We're just going to pretend that fact of life
there's such
didn't happen.
Big, massive difference. And the thing is, I think you got to understand, especially with certain sports, that can become lethally dangerous. Right, like swimming, maybe not necessarily you're going to get hit, but certain sports where even accidental contact, it gets dangerous, and that's the discussion you have to have.
I don't disagree. There was a study done by rugby players and found that trans women in playing rugby have a 41% more likely chance of injuring cis women playing rugby. Yep. I know this full well. I've acknowledged this. So, right?
Can you address this comment, Anirudh?
Trans women have less testosterone than as an actual woman.
Because I know that is not a fact. I know that is absolutely incorrect. But Anirudh,
the only way that would be possible is if you had some endocrinological function or your doctor was irresponsible in giving you steroids. I don't know if that's possible. I find that very unlikely.
So I need to cut in here because the testosterone levels are only one aspect of why it makes things unfair, and I'm sure we've all heard about the bone density, fast twist mode. Mm-hmm. I'm sure we've gone through all that a million times.
Lung capacity, the whole nine.
Right. So the question needs to be, Anirudh, do you see that you're the one who doesn't have a dog in the fight because you don't want sports to be fair? You don't care if sports are fair. So
I care that all athletes follow the same rules.
You can't,
and that they are fairly compensated for their.
It should be like this, but I don't really. We're at a table trying to make things fair. You don't care about that goal. And then you come to the table and demand that we go by your ideas that don't lead us towards the goal that we.
Wait, you said fair compensation. Why do you care about fair compensation but not fair competition?
Fair competition means that individuals are allowed to compete, that we're not excluding trans women or trans men. That's fair competition to me.
Right.
I do care about fair
That is
competition.
not fair competition to 99.9% of society.
Well, so I'll give you an example that you would be much more familiar with, Dr. Evil Genius. We know clinically that on average, Black women tend to have higher bone density than white women, and that they tend to have higher muscle mass as a proportion to their weight than white women.
That's why they dominate sports everywhere
That's why
they go.
Serena Williams dominates.
That's why the NHL is going to be taken over by black men, Captain Paul.
Would you ever be in favor of a community of white women saying we don't want to allow Black women in sports because then that would take away opportunities for white women? I think you would rightfully view that as disgusting and racist.
Not necessarily if they can prove that there is an actual statistically significant difference. So when you're talking about swimmers, there is a 12 to 16% difference in average performance. Like it is like without even trying, men just blow the women away. But among white women and black women, just how dominant are, like when you look at let's take tennis, right? Because we know that the Williams sisters were at the top for a long time. How many black women were in the rankings in the WTA, and where did the black women tend to fall among those rankings? Of was it like 500? I think they ranked like the top 500.
Yeah. They did a disproportionately better showing than their representation in the population.
Yeah.
So within that scope, I think it's horribly racist to exclude black women for the feelings of white women. I view that as equally bigoted and equally morally wrong to exclude trans women for the feelings of cis women. They both are women to me, and both of their feelings are equally valid or equally unvalid.
So like I can understand.
We're running societies based upon the whims of people's feelings.
So I can understand.
That's how we've always run.
But I understand where you're coming from and where you feel, right? Because that's how you have a real strong dog in this fight regarding that. But when it comes to actually the biological aspect of it, I don't think there's much of a comparison like between black women and white women, and then cis women, and then trans women.
There's a statistical difference in their muscle mass and their bone density. Now, the difference between black women and white women pales in comparison to the difference between trans women and cis women.
Okay, so
and very punchy. The vast majority of the athletes are very, very angry with what went down. The vast majority of them, but a lot of them have been silenced. They have been silenced. And thank you, Barry Punchy, for at least trying to remain civil in this discussion, because Paul and I were going to address this article alone. But this is a great segue into what we really wanted to talk about today. And that is cancel culture has reached the therapist's couch. Okay. Now, I want to make it very, very clear. There was no cisgendered, male who is super evil because he was born with a penis and he doesn't have any shame in that. This was written by Maggie Mulqueen. And of course, she has a dog in this fight because she is a psychologist. Effective talk therapy is premised on complete privacy and trust between the patient and therapist. These are the foundations for the open, candid, and difficult conversations necessary to get to the root of personal issues. But during many of my recent sessions, it's felt as if there were more than two of us in the room. In a world that is increasingly hostile to differences of opinion, my patients and I find ourselves afraid of using our voices. The overreach of cancel culture from across the spectrum is making its way into therapists' offices, and that is worrisome for clinicians and patients alike. Both parties feel the need to feel free of social litmus tests and politically motivated legislation that constrict the conversation and reduce complex psychological questions into right and wrong ideological stances. Mental health is best served when therapy is not merely a confessional, but helps people realize change in their lives, such as change comes about when therapists use their expertise to promote self-awareness in patients, which the patients can then act on. The changes in behavior may be as subtle as asking for forgiveness for a mistake or as profound as leaving an abusive relationship. If either the patient or the therapist is walking on eggshells, the opportunity for the meaningful dialogue that leads to such healing is greatly diminished. Yet, in a world that is increasingly hostile to differences of opinion, my patients and I find ourselves afraid of using our voices. And in this article, she goes on to, this is what I thought about when we were talking about this trans issue, right? In some cases, fear of social repercussions creates a new type of isolation and anxiety that makes it hard for my patients to process their emotional responses to events, even with some of the closest people in their lives. One of my patients, for instance, has a transgender daughter. As she walks this journey with her, she often complains to me that she must put up a false front to the outside world. Quote, to express anything short of joy that my kid is trans makes me look unsupportive and risk criticism or worse. I only feel safe telling you all of my complicated feelings. I love my kid and will defend her to the ends of the earth, but I need time to process this change and come to accept it. End quote. Her legitimate concerns that others will hear her struggle as unsupportive have led her to distance herself from friends and relatives and delete her social media presence. Now, it was Anna Rude who brought up the isolation argument, saying that, we have these harms that we must seek to mitigate because, this group has this or that problem. They may end up lonely. They may end up having all of these kinds of issues, right? But here we are seeing a woman who is uneasy about this transition, but she understands as well as I do, as well as Captain Paul does, as well as Lutch does, that if she just expresses the difficulties that she is having, she was going to be labeled what, Anna Rude? I think transphobic is the word. Okay.
Oh, yes, she would be.
Right. So do you think that is a net gain for society? For her to be suffering in silence this way, or is this a net negative?
I'm confused by the question. So my reading of this article is that for some people, the social changes around them are very stressful. Having a trans child is stressful because that's more medical fees. That's going to be difficult.
That is not what she's talking about. That's not what she's talking about. No, so what she's talking about. Do not strawman this.
I'm not strawman.
Very, very clear. I'm going to highlight this again. She's talking about one thing. She's not talking about the cost. She's not talking about, she's not talking about any of those things. She made it very, 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 very clear, very painfully clear, to express anything short of joy that my kid is trans makes me look unsupportive and risk criticism or worse. This has nothing to do with how much that the gender assignment surgery costs. It has nothing to do with reminding them to take all of their medications every single day to make sure the transition is successful. It has nothing about that.
So the question is really how often is this happening compared to the incidences of whatever trans issues are going on?
Yeah, that would almost be impossible to know because most of this information is protected by HIPAA. So it would be impossible to know.
I got to call you out, Anna Rude. I got to call you out here. You're a really intelligent guy, which is why we enjoy having you here. That is a massive cop-out. Yep. Because you can see all over social media, you can see all over society when you see the term cancel culture trending the way it does on a regular basis. We can be, you're talking about 433 is a large sample size to you. And we've got people who have been shamed into silence. It is way more than 433 people who are afraid of expressing certain things for fear of what this woman is talking about.
Dr. Evil, could you let me finish my thought? Because I actually agree with you on a lot. Yes, the cancel culture is definitely stressful on these individuals. And the reason why I brought out cost is an example for where she might be shamed is she says, oh, transitioning is expensive. That might sound to many people like a complaint, and she could get a lot of grief for saying something like that. right? I agree with what these women's feels. Her feelings are valid. Her seeking a therapist is important.
So the question was, is that experience a net negative or a net positive? That
I have no way of calculating that. I have no way of knowing.
Again,
you're more intelligent than that, Anirudh.
Exactly.
I feel like I'm really getting a strong disingenuousness in your.
So if we're trying to compete, like the improvement to trans individuals' mental health,
we're not asking for hard numbers. We're asking for what you, Anirudh, takes based on the information that you have, and call it a thought experiment. That how many people are suffering like this, and is that a good or bad thing?
I would think that the number of people suffering like this is smaller than the number of people that cancel culture has helped. So I think this would be a net beneficial thing. But I have no way of substantiating that with hard numbers.
Okay, that's a more definitive response. Let's go to this next example. Another patient, a faculty member at a university, went through a brutal tenure review because he held a conservative viewpoint that differed from his colleagues. This experience brought him into therapy because he wasn't sleeping and was afraid of losing his job. He was vulnerable and worried about being misunderstood. So before he would trust me with the details of his situation, he spent many sessions making sure my leanings on issues related to his field wouldn't affect my view of him. Quote, I don't understand how they can espouse academic freedom when they expect me to toe a line that is the opposite of that. End quote. I reassured him that I was there to offer him the help he needed, regardless of my own views, and that there was no political line he had to toe in our sessions. Giving him the room to speak openly about his beliefs was critical to his ability to continue to function at his job.
So this is precisely what I was talking about earlier when we were talking about how this stuff has seeped into the institutions and how whatever studies you have are being conducted by people who are already of a different, worldview on this particular issue. So it's begging the question that what we're asking as a matter of ideology is already answered in your world, and to people like us who don't share your ideology, that it's not so cut and clear like that. So the idea that studies can support what you're saying and studies can support what I am saying is, again, a product of language obfuscation. And so the split has gone so far that we now live in two different worlds where we can read the same exact article and get two completely different understandings and think that the solution to think it's two different issues and two different solutions to all of that.
Well,
but that's human.
Look at this comment here from Barry Punchy. This encompasses exactly what Lutch is talking about. Yeah. The mom needs to go through her feelings in private and with a therapist, not have her therapist post her business online. Well, not only did this therapist not reveal the identity of the person she was talking about, but this article goes directly to the problems that people are having to be able to connect with their therapist in the first place. Exactly. You're supposed to be 100% completely honest with their therapist, and that is the point of this article. The point of the article is she cannot go through her feelings in private because she believes she is going to be judged, and she can't work out her feelings because she is so worried about having her reputation destroyed and being alienated just for simply having struggled with something that everybody is struggling with. Right? Like, we want to talk about inclusivity, but we want to cheer when someone gets canceled. But then when somebody on your side gets canceled, it's the end of the fucking world. And that is something that us in the middle, because I'm a little bit more in the middle than because I think I just had this conversation with Captain Paul earlier, where I'm probably somewhere around 50-50, 55-45. Depending on the day, I'm a little more conservative than liberal, sometimes a little bit more liberal than conservative. It is what it is, right? But the highlight here is that even in private, the very palpable reality that holding a differing view is not just uncomfortable, but also potentially dangerous makes it difficult for someone to speak their truth.
Right.
So if Barry Punchy is saying, well, they need to go with a therapist. Yeah, they tried that. And because of all of this stuff, she's having an issue being able to even go there with the therapist. And then the therapist is having trouble being able to help these people because they can't get a full picture of what this person is going through because they're so worried about being canceled all the goddamn time.
Well,
I think Punchy, this
Dr.
lady,
Evil.
This lady, hold on. Can you bring up Barry Punchy's comment there before we move the next one?
Next one, last one she just put up.
Said that she told her therapist. Like she told her therapist, yes. But how many? The point is, how many women are not because they are not comfortable enough doing so. And so, and the point is that this is a phenomenon that's happening. So yes, some women are going to be talking about it, but I'm sure you wouldn't make this argument about people who are women who are uncomfortable with talking about their experience with SA. Just because
we don't say that silence means they didn't go through it, right? We understand how touchy that is, and we allow them to keep it private for as long as they feel that they need to.
This is direct victim blaming, is it not?
Oh, I would definitely agree on that. Very punchy.
And the thing is, very punchy. But the thing is, Barry Punchy has an ideology, and everything is framed through that ideology. It's very difficult for them to break through the ideology and see the greater point. They need to find the right therapist. There are people everywhere having this problem. Right. The therapists are now complaining about it.
Not only that, but once you've gone to the wrong therapist and you've said something, then theoretically the damage is done. Of course, you hope that your session is going to be private, but the way things are going is that people are going to say, "Oh, well, if you're expressing these ideations of not liking trans people, then it could lead to this, that, and the other." And so that's not a HIPAA violation to bring that to the attention of this person.
As long as no names are disclosed and private information is disclosed, it's like you can speak in more general terms.
Yeah, because the thing is, they're not, she's not the only mother having this issue in the world. The article goes on to say, further complicating matters is the reality that therapists are not immune to the culture any more than patients. The opportunity for give and take can only happen when there is mutual trust. And the penalty for a breach in that trust is the hurt of misunderstanding, not the revenge of a lawsuit or defamation on social media. And let me add this as well. Do we know that this person was contacted by their therapist and say, hey, I'm not going to name you, but I'm writing an article and I'm going to use your example, but there will be no identifying information. Do you think that is more likely what happen, or the therapist who is experiencing this person trusts them that they're just going to put their shit out there without permission? What do you think is more likely?
I think a responsible therapist would ask in the background or a way if I could use your example anonymously in order to do that. I think that's what a responsible therapist would do. I hope this is a responsible use. I have no way of knowing.
Yes, right. But there is no rule that says that. So this woman who's having this issue may have no idea that her experience is even out there because the therapist is not breaking any
HIPAA violation. She's not leaving any personal.
But the thing is, again, we're not just talking about the letter of the law. I hold you guys accountable to the spirit of the law as well. And the thing is that just like Anna Ruth said, you want a therapist that is going to ask you first.
Right.
Oh, 100%. I don't disagree. I'm just, but I think for the message of the article, I think is pretty freaking prevalent, though.
The article goes on to say, yet some states have passed laws saying that doctors can't talk about options with their pregnant patients and that teachers can't discuss LGBTQ identity with students. It's not unreasonable to conclude that therapists could start looking over their shoulders and worrying about the potential fallout if they broach certain topics. Now the shoe is on the other goddamn foot because, like I always say, the left is always complaining about blah, 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 but they are also just as guilty as the right. And in this case, The right is doing the cancel culture thing they complain about in this instance, where women are not allowed to talk about what options they have when they get pregnant. And then you have this, I guess you were saying, don't say gay or nay say, I don't know, whatever the nickname for the bill is, right?
Yeah.
That's an added burden.
Bill.
Huh?
The Parental Rights and Education Bill.
The Parental Rights and Education Bill, right? The colloquially known as Anarud.
The Don't Say Gay bill.
Right. Okay. Barry says, yes, the therapist's job is to be completely neutral and help their client. Even pedophiles go through therapy. Absolutely. And that is the point of the article, Barry. That is the point of the article. The therapist's job is being hindered by cancel culture.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. Cancel culture is stressful for individuals. It makes it harder for them to seek therapy.
Can I pose a
or
question?
be honest.
Or deliver therapy. Lutch?
Yeah. Can I deliver pose a question that might help reframe how we're thinking about this? So, we're talking about the worry that comes about talking about sensitive topics. So let's flip it and say that this issue is happening with the way people talk about abortion. So what if it was a bunch of liberal people saying that they can't they don't feel comfortable expressing that they are pro-choice because we're seeing that as it says in the article that the therapists are not immune to the ideology. Then you have to worry about, okay, if my therapist thinks that my decision to terminate this baby is murder, well then does that get into the HIPAA stuff? We're like, oh, but now they're allowed to stay because if you're gonna if someone's in imminent danger, then the HIPAA laws are not in effect or whatever it is. So
can I answer that question? Yeah, can I take a first crack at it? I'm in therapy right now, so this is based on the state of Texas, and everything is confidential except in two cases. One where you're going to create imminent harm to yourself or imminent harm to another person. So it's feasible that in some states where abortion is considered murder, unfortunately, like Texas, that a therapist might be required to disclose that and violate, or it wouldn't be considered a violation of HIPAA, but an exception.
It's an exception.
Right, and so we would see that as an issue because whether or not you believe that abortion should be what it is, if somebody is pro-choice, they should have a space to go and talk about that.
At least to talk about it.
Wait, I agree 100%. I want everyone to seek therapy if they can. I'm a huge proponent of that.
Okay, so that's not the same. Is that the same when we flip it back to feeling like the people who are having trans family members, trans kids, whatever it is, that expressing that can be seen as so wrong that the worry is that even in a therapist's office, clients are not comfortable expressing that.
I mean,
yes, I would be very worried by that. I would be worried by that in both scenarios.
Yeah, if you have to, when it comes to therapy, you have to find someone that you can kind of click with too. So you're gonna not open up in the first session, obviously. So, I just think getting
everything except they think.
1 second, let Captain finish.
So one of the things that I kind of have a problem and just kind of discussing this article right here is that talking about teachers can't discuss LGBT identity with students and therapists worrying about fallout when they broach certain topics. I think it's far different. A therapist talks with a kid compared to a teacher, right? Because obviously the parent is paying for that therapist, or you know what I mean, taking them to that therapist to maybe discuss those topics. I fully believe that they're my children. You're in my household. I'm going to raise you. I don't need outside influences from teachers trying to put some dogma in their head at a very young age. I don't agree with it. But
Jimmy Dean, I'm flattered. But I had a very traumatic childhood, so that's why I'm in therapy.
But I don't necessarily agree with having teachers broach how my kids' values should be.
Especially when they're not trained on the subject. You're supposed to be teaching little Timmy
like
math.
You teach my kids social studies. You ain't a gender specialist. I don't need that shit. And that's where I think like, can you get into the greater discussion about identity? Fine, but the bill itself, if you read it, it's like kindergarten through third grade. Like, why? Like, you ain't gonna be teaching kids that shit. You shouldn't be teaching kids that shit. And I think the problem I have, right? The problem I have with this is that I feel like people in their professional lives put too much of their personal lives in their professional lives. Like, there used to be a day, right, where you would keep that shit separate. Like, in my business, I don't share my personal shit in my business life, right? Like, when I'm on the tugboat and I'm working and shit, like that, I keep business, personal. Like, I don't need you and storing your core beliefs onto my kids, because like that's the one thing I definitely agree with that, Bill. It's like, yo, like that's not your space. Now, if my kid down the road comes down, like maybe like 16, 17, 18, thinks they're trans, we can have that discussion. I'm not going to hate my kid because, as a parent, you should always love your child. But I'm not going to have someone at like the age of like talk to my kid at the age of 4 or 5 or 6 about all these different identities and like all this stuff that like it's just confusing at an age where they don't even like, if they could eat ice cream for fucking dinner every night, they would. They don't even know what they want for dinner. They don't even know what they want to play as. Like, it's just it gets way too like, let me raise my fucking kids. Unless I'm beating the motherfucker, that's my kid. Like, that's my opinion.
Not just blame it on your alter ego, Papa Thunder.
Well, exactly.
And just to be clear, sorry, were you done, Cap?
No, I'll just surmise it in this way: is that therapist is different because as a parent, I'm paying my kid to go that. If I know my kid, like maybe there's something I just can't handle, maybe there's something that internally is there that maybe I'm just not a specialist in, go to a therapist. Then they can have that discussion. But like I'm not having like some 4th grade English teacher teach my kid about like penises and vaginas and like you can, adjust it and have a different one. Like, no, it's like, let's just like, let's have.
I'd like to have a different penis.
Well, I mean, you would.
I like mine.
I mean, listen, like, I think you should have been.
I want one as long as my right leg, which is also the same length as my left leg.
But I think when it comes down to it is like, there's just, I think as parents, the government's trying to take away as parents, like, will control over
that autonomy
of our kids. Like, yo, like, you're the government. Fuck off. This is my kid. I'm going to raise them. And if they grow up with different values after raising in my household, that's perfectly fine. That's actually usually what happens in these cases, right? Like a Catholic girl, right? You know the stereotype. You know what I mean? It's like you grow up as a preacher's daughter, and then you'll go to college.
She's done anal, so she's still a virgin.
Completely exactly. But that's when you're 18 and you're adult, you can make those choices. But don't ever fucking make my kid who doesn't have a fucking single clue about that shit make that decision or try to influence them. It's disgusting.
What you got, Lutch?
So just to Steelman, like the other side, Anna, would you tell me if this is something that you would respond to this type of thing? I was having this conversation, and somebody was talking about like, okay, what if there, what if there is a kid who is gay and his parents are super religious, and he knows that they'll never accept that, and he's afraid that if he tells his parents that something violent could happen. The Parental Rights and Education Bill does not prevent the teacher from having that conversation with the child and referring the child to CPS or something like that. So I don't know if that's a position that you would hold, but just to steelman the idea that we're not trying to endanger children who have quote unquote bad parents. It's just that on a balance of probabilities, there is more danger to be had when you're giving the right to government employees, public servants, these teachers or whatnot, to have these types of conversations that absolutely can lead to grooming.
All right, so let's actually talk about this because it's actually a very interesting conversation, and I'm very data driven on this. So, one, as long as the teachers are able
I got to stop you right there. I want you guys to notice that Anirudh is on different sides of the fence depending on what it is. In some ways, he's like, the public good is in following people's feelings, and in other things, he's data driven. Now, I want to know what is. It seems to be pretty arbitrary what you're data driven on and what you aren't. So I just want to make sure that,
even on these
that's something that I've
situations when I'm
noticed.
focused on public feeling, I'm looking at public data. So, for example, for trans individuals, how they feel impacts their suicidality. I sent you the studies on that too. We can go through them again if you would like. But for the most part, I only care about maximizing well-being. Sometimes that means listening to people's feelings, and sometimes that doesn't mean listening to their feelings. It just depends.
Okay, but continue on with your overall point.
All right. So generally on my position, my biggest issue with the Don't Say Gay bill isn't that I'm afraid that it won't allow for parents to call CPS on potentially abusive parents. That's not my biggest fear. My biggest fear is that we leave children susceptible to being groomed by not giving them adequate information about sexuality. One of my favorite examples is a German example where, as young as the age of 5, they start giving comprehensive sex ed to children. That even includes about the use of condoms and how to protect yourself. And they start at a young age, at the age of 5. And the reason why they do that is because empirically it has been proven by introducing comprehensive sex ed as young as possible, you make it easier for children to identify when they have been abused and for them to report on this.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but I'll take it a step further and say that how about just not being ashamed of your body? How about that? But I think that a lot of times we have these arbitrary views on when is a good time to teach your kids certain things, and more to Captain's point.
Yeah.
I think somebody else made the point. I think it was Traditionalist made this point. Some people, they're cowards when it comes to talking about certain difficult situations. They're like, listen, I don't want to have to broach this topic. I'm going to leave this on this underpaid public servant who is using their own money to buy school supplies. I think that, that is, that is something that needs to be,
it's about, I think this is something where I'll definitely validate what a lot of conservative parents are feeling, which is it's fine to feel as though the teachers did a bad job in certain lessons. And I think in those kinds of cases, parent involvement might be necessary in order to find craft and make better lessons for children. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we lived in a world where parents took the first initiative and took care of their children and told them everything they need to know as young as possible, great, we wouldn't have such a high rate of teen pregnancy. But we know this. So take the example of teen pregnancy. States without comprehensive sex ed have higher rates of teen pregnancy, higher rates of teen STIs. Likewise, in countries that adopt universal comprehensive sex ed, they tend to see a decline in sexual assault and molestation of children. So there seems to be an empirically driven argument that we want to try to introduce these things as young as possible to children, while at the same time making sure that it's as accessible as possible. The goal should be to focus on, and I'm calling out leftists on this too. The goal should be to make the best, most comprehensive educational plan, not necessarily getting outraged by random incidences of the Don't Say Gay bill. It's about creating good lesson plans.
So this is the thing, right? I can somewhat agree with you educating kids and to a certain degree at a certain age. But I think the problem I have, right, is that it seems like instead of actually having a good dialogue like we're trying to have here, it just goes into kindergarten, I got to teach them this, gender identity, all this wild shit. And I'm not saying that disrespectfully. I'm just being honest. Like, kids at a very young age aren't going to be able to fully grasp that, right? My girl's she's a teacher. She teaches in these schools up here in Mass. And
I slightly disagree with that, though, Paul. I don't think that we really know what kids are capable of because we don't really test it.
Okay, but that's great, but we can disagree there. But what I'm saying here is that for me as a parent, as a good parent, and this, you can have a greater conversation why there's such poor parenting, because I feel like, in my personal opinion, look at the divorce rates. Look how people don't stay together. They pick the wrong partners. It's a whole societal problem why we're having men and women as whole just growing up and kind of, I would say, in a poor fashion, right? So you don't have great, male role models. You don't even have great female role models, right? Because there's a lot of broken homes. And I like all my friends. I'm one of the only friends out of my friend group that has parents that stay together, right? So they didn't have the They didn't have that luxury of growing up with a household where they had both parents and both effects on them. But this being said, it's like, as a parent, for someone like me, that rolls on me. Like, I want to be able to teach my kid. Like, if my kid gets curious at a certain age, we can have that conversation. It shouldn't be awkward to have that conversation with your kid regarding sex. Like, yo, if someone touches you like this or this, you tell me, or you tell it. Like, you know what I mean? You report that. But like, I don't like where you have teachers that aren't necessarily educated on a topic like gender identity or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Broaching that topic with my child when they have no fucking idea what they're talking about.
And you got these teachers that are like, yeah, I want to announce to the class that I have sex with these people. What the fuck?
Like you'll see so much cringy stuff regarding some of these teachers these days about like, oh, I just told my class I'm gay. And I'm like, bro, like, that's cool. Keep it moving. I have nothing to hate against you. But like, I need to tell like third graders that shit. They're just going to go to recess to play kickball. Like, it's just, and it's weird. It's just a very weird situation where I feel like
we have sex ed.
Well, no, we do not.
The issue is we already have sex ed in a lot of schools, if not
we don't have it enough, and it's not
okay. And
that's an opinion.
I would agree. 38 states don't require that sex ed be medically accurate.
Right, but you're saying that there should be, and it's just kind of like, well, that's still your opinion.
So, but my point is that whether so that's the conversation to have. I'm all for more and better sex education. The issue is the age, and so you personally may feel that at 3 to 7 years old that is appropriate, but you don't. You as the voter, as the teacher, as the other parent, you don't get to decide that for my children.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, I want to steel man Dr. Paul and say, all right, so in an ideal world, actually not even ideal world, in a world where there are parents who are responsible with their children who make that conversation, there should not be a need for us to talk about sex ed in school because we would think that parents would cover that, right? That's the inclination. The unfortunate case is that states that don't have comprehensive sex ed, children don't receive that education
anywhere,
especially from their parents. And so now this becomes the issue. All right, if we operate on the assumption that parents will make the most rational decision for their children, we like to think that. There are many cases where they don't. Now it becomes, do we need to intervene? And what are the costs of intervention? So, for example, we have CPS because we know that there are some parents who will abuse their children. Absolutely. So we don't assume that all parents are good.
Right. No, and I understand where you're coming from.
We assume most parents are good, which is why CPS is not the largest government entity.
But this is what I'm saying. I'm not saying to abolish sex education, but I don't believe having K through 3, and I actually think it should be probably through K through 8, or K through 7. I don't think that should.
There should be more recess and more physical activity, not teaching kids about that stuff.
That should be what is more important to me. It's like, at a certain age where they don't fucking understand this type of concepts as adults. I think people forget, like, kids are extremely impressionable, right?
And they also don't want to stay seated.
You say something, right, a certain way. Like, if a teacher's, you want to be a unicorn, and the fucking kid will think they're a unicorn or some wild shit. Like, kids are extremely impressionable. And for me, it's like at a certain age, it comes to me as the parent when they're younger to teach them important things about, don't let anyone touch you, stranger danger, all that good shit. But then, like, when they get older and they can actually understand some of these concepts, then we can have that education because it's going to go far greater. Like, that's how I feel. You know what I mean? And like, I understand that in certain states, there's a lot of low education regarding sex education. But I also think as a whole in this country, we have a lot of broken homes where you have a lot of these problems for that reason. Like, where you see single moms, tell me where there's a good father figure. Where you see teenage moms, actually, show me where there's a good mother figure.
No, I think that's great because we have strong evidence that comprehensive sex ed, starting out as the youngest ages as possible, are beneficial in reducing incidences of teenage pregnancies, which are a big contributor to single motherhood and single fatherhood as well. So if we want to take steps in order to reduce these, we are going to have to embrace the German model, which is starting comprehensive sex ed as young as 5. I have a full meta-analysis on this.
You can send me
go through it too.
We know what I would do. You know what I would do to split the difference between Paul and Anirudh? I would say that if you do not want your child in these classes, You need to deliver the curriculum and then have them test on that curriculum at home.
I would love that. I agree entirely. If that's a great middle ground, if the parents want to say, I don't trust the school to do the best job for my kid, I'll teach them that and beyond in a way that they'll understand, and they'll test perfectly on that test.
Because even if the teacher's going to teach it well, a lot of parents just don't sit. It just doesn't sit well of learning that really delicate part of life from a stranger outside the home. To let the child deliver the curriculum and test the kids on it.
Yeah, I've worked as a teacher. I've worked as a tutor. So I know for a fact I'm better at teaching than most people. So I would prefer to do that to my children.
Right. That makes sense.
See, I think there's a happy medium that can be reached there.
Well, we are pressed for time, and this is at Lutch's request. Very Punchy had a thought that I thought was very good, and I agree with it. But Lutch wasn't really quite sure, wasn't really quite understanding the statement here.
What does this mean?
There is no fence. You say people's view of the world and their moral compass is also many shades of gray. And I do agree with that. I think that this is why we're having these conversations, and we're not just cheering for the one guy that takes the ultra liberal stance, as Barry Pucci has done today. We're looking to hear all sides of the argument, but also hold each other accountable to participating in the discussion in good faith. So yes, there are many shades of gray, but this is why we don't demonize people because they're not ready to accept trans, or we don't demonize people because, they may not be attracted to this race or that gender or whatever. I think that, what you just said kind of highlights that. What do you have to say about that, Lutch?
No, I definitely agree. I just didn't understand the context in which, what I didn't know if it was a response to something. I didn't know what it was. But yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah. So I really, really, really want to thank Louis Rossman. We all love Louis. Louis is a friend of the show here. I want to thank Anirudh Garg because he came into a den of lions here, and he held his own, and there were some things that I wasn't quite sure like where he was coming from, and he took that in stride. So I really do appreciate that, sir. Lutch, Lutch is in the clutch, man. Lutch is here. And also, we have more conservative voices like a Louis Rossman and our esteemed Captain Paul. And the fact that this is Chibi Dean is the man. The thing that we are building here, and I don't know if Barry Punchy has left the building, but Barry Punchy needs to understand that the reason why we created this. You're here. Barry Punchy is still here. The reason why we created this platform is so that people like Anirudh Garg and Captain Paul can have discussions with each other that are productive. And even if they're not productive, we sit here as men, we maintain our proper masculine frame. We allow people to have the positions that they want to have. If they want to put something out there, we'll challenge the position. We don't hate the person. We challenge the position. Yeah. And that's what we do here. Lutch is excellent in holding people accountable for the arguments that they make. He holds me accountable all the time. Sometimes things get contentious, but it's all in love. And this is where, the discourse must go. And this is something that we want to create here at the Talking Shit podcast. We want people to be able to express themselves without, going through what some of these therapists have gone through. These therapists are in private conversations, and there is a huge white elephant that sits in between them. And, you could say that it is an unintended consequence of, where we're at in a society that is in flux. But we have to understand that there are a lot of difficulties in our lives, and especially with the way the economy is, you've got the Great Recession. We had, 10 people shot in a subway station for literally no reason. And we're going through a lot. So for people to add on, gender identity on top of it and try to demonize their neighbors, depending on what position they hold, it's a lot for people to deal with when people are already dealing with a lot. So here at the Talking Shit Podcast, and we hope that you follow and subscribe on YouTube, Barry Punchy, because, even though some of us, may not agree with your statements, we do respect you, and we respect the fact that you deserve to have the viewpoints that you want to have. So we welcome you here as part of the community, and that we hope that you stick around for more conversations. Anirudh, what would you like to close with today?
Of course. Thank you for having me. It did feel like stepping into a lion's den, but thankfully for me, I'm an elephant. So I think I'm pretty good. No, it was an honor. Thank you for introducing me to Louis Rossmann. He's a personal hero of mine. His advocacy for right to repair is incredibly important. I'm very grateful to get to meet him. Kind of scratch another thing off my bucket list. Thank you very much, Dr. Evil.
Oh, no. You haven't scratched it off yet. We're not done with that. Louis Rossmann is one of my very best friends on planet Earth. He will be back. You will be back. We will have discussions about right to repair specifically, periodically, as the movement kind of morphs and takes shape. So you've only just scratched the surface on that one. Don't scratch it off yet.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on this podcast. Thank you, Captain Paul. Thank you again, Lutch. We've had many conversations, and we're somehow still able to keep it respectful. So
unless he's being a bioterrorist.
There are things we're going to have to deal with one way or another.
You're never going to live that down. I really hope that you understand. You are never going to live that down.
I am nothing if I cannot take my L's gracefully. I can do that.
Fucking carrot.
Oh man,
Let's go get the jab.
That was that felt like down here felt really, really good. Normally I have bad feelings in this area of my body. I feel good feelings. And the thing is, you're a super good sport. Again, that is what this is for. Like Anirudh knows that we hold no ill will towards him whatsoever. No. We have a lot of respect for Anirudh here. He brings a lot of the numbers. He brings a lot of fire and desire because we don't want an echo chamber here. And on certain topics, we could definitely, if it was just three of us up here, it would just be a weird circle jerk with three guys that are not attracted to each other. Lutch, what are your closing statements?
I just want to say
sorry.
Last thing, follow me on my social, mostly my YouTube, The Dialectic with Anirudh Garg, and my book, The Greater Man, A New Paradigm for Masculinity, is coming out in May. Follow me. You'll have all the details on where you can buy it. Please buy my book and support it. Dr. Evil, I know for a fact that I'll send you a copy of my book. I promise that. But you will love half of it and you'll hate half of it. So I have a feeling that it'll be a good, fun conversation.
Well, that's just living in America, isn't it?
Yeah, bro. Beautiful.
Before you dip out, let's let Anirudh give his final statements on the conversation, and we know that you're the king of the shameless plugs, so the floor is yours.
You mean me?
Oh, you mean Lutch or?
You said Anirudh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I said, and Lutch is the king of the shameless plugs. So the floor is yours. I stole that from Lutch, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Lutch. According to Anirudh, I'm a bioterrorist, but I'm also the host of the I Didn't Read Your Book podcast, where I talk to authors about their books that I have not read. Anirudh actually was a very early guest, so if you go over to my channel, I think it was episode 6, we do have a long conversation about his book and the issues in there. I'm also expanding and doing more stuff like this, talking about topical issues and just getting the word out there, trying to have these conversations, trying to show you guys these conversations. So please go over and subscribe to my channel as well. I Didn't Read Your Book podcast, and you can follow me on socials anywhere at idryblutch. That's IDRYB Lutch.
I'm going to give a plug to Lutch that is near and dear to me. Lutch has really good content as far as his breakdown of books and the discussions that he has on the books. But the real treat is when he talks to other content creators on YouTube. He had Jesse on Fire. I really love that discussion. And he had a discussion with these two guys, a podcast that I don't remember the name of, and I don't give a fuck, but I love the conversation that you guys had, especially on, how they chose their content, the process that they go through, the metamorphosis, the maturation of their show for it to be what it is today. So Lutz doesn't just talk about books he doesn't read, like a true ignorant person, but he also talks about other things on his platform, and I really, really enjoy that. So if you're not into books, still subscribe to his channel anyway. He's a really, really good interviewer as well. Whoa, we got Omega in the building.
Relate.
Wow. Thank you for finding us over here on TSP. I appreciate you. He is a loyal he's a loyal follower from my video game streaming. Hey, Paul, talk to him.
So I just want to plug Lutch's one more video. Lutch, he actually just released one today. I watched the whole entirety of it. It was really good. Definitely check that out when you get a chance. It was about a World War II, I believe, Lutch, if I'm speaking correctly.
Yep.
And his experiences as a native, being half native, and I forget the other ethnicity, but
I mean, true to your whiteness.
Yeah, exactly, bro. Ignorant as shit. But as for me, Captain, I think we got a few videos. I already recorded a couple videos, so look forward to that on the channel. There's going to be probably about a video a day.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. I watched this live. He was talking about dogs. I don't know shit about dogs. I don't want dogs in my house, but it was fucking fascinating.
Yeah.
Tune in next week. I got another the podcast episode for next week is with a semi-famous dog trainer. Definitely really cool conversation. But again, I want to thank you guys, Dr. Evil and Captain Paul, for having me on the platform, and Arud for coming and taking all our shit. We've all been in the hot seat. I was in the hot seat for the race discussion. So
I was in the hot seat for the male self-defense discussion.
Yep.
We're all gonna take our turn on the hot seat.
Next.
Yeah, so there's a low level respect that we all have for each other, regardless of the possible consequences, simply because we want to create a truly inclusive world, not just for certain segments of the population, but we want everybody to be able to speak their piece. So I want you guys to definitely subscribe and share the Talking Shit podcast. Share these conversations. Have people comment on this. We're gonna have our channel manager clip this. Turn it up. Clip this up into video bits. Encourage your friends to come over and listen to our discussions, because I think that we had a very well-rounded discussion. I think it was a very mature discussion, and I think that a lot of people could benefit from just listening to us throw these ideas around. So please share. Make sure you hit the like button. It's really important. If you're on YouTube, please follow us on Twitch. If you're on Twitch, please subscribe to us on YouTube. And we will see you on episode 39. Peace.
Thank you, guys.